Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you're watching What If Naruto Went Back in Time to Avenge Hinata. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto gazed down at the mangled and lifeless body of Sasuke. He turned to face his longtime rival and former teammate, the man who had been like a brother to him. He now saw himself as the man who had stolen everything from him, a self-centered jerk who prioritized his objectives and retribution over his friends, teachers, and his own village, which was now on fire. In order to destroy the final hidden village, Sasuke and his group summoned Taka, Madara Uchiha, the ninja of the sound, and the remaining Akatsuki to Konoha. One by one, they had been destroying each village until the old leaf was the only one left. If the betrayal of one of their own, a certain pink-haired kunoichi, had been discovered prior to the siege starting, Naruto and his companions might have survived the conflict. Everything went to hell because of her self-centered desire for Sasuke. Naruto turned his attention from the corpse in front of him to the remnants of the location he had vowed to defend. Prior to the attack, he had been elected Hokage, his dream had come true, and for the first time in his life, he had experienced true love. However, like the rest of the village, his love was now gone and broken. They were all dead. Tsunade, Gaara, Iruka, Konohamaru, Shikamaru, Sai, Ino, Neji, and Kakashi. Everyone who had ever referred to him as a friend was now extinct. However, he was now facing the death that had grieved him so much. He gazed into Hinata Hyuga's lifeless lavender eyes, the ones who had loved him since they were young, who had put herself in danger to protect him from Nagato, and who had proposed to him but never received a response. Naruto was at his breaking point. He collapsed to his knees and started sobbing. He sobbed for what felt like hours before he was able to stop himself. He stood up and surveyed the area. When he saw what he was looking for, he moved in its direction. As Naruto gazed down at Sakura's corpse, his eyes were filled with hatred. "You bitch," Naruto growled. "This is all your fault." Then he used all his strength to stomp on Sakura's face. "You just had to betray us for that murdering shit. You betrayed and killed Tsunade. You manipulated Lee to help you and broke his neck for thanks." Then he bent over and punched her lifeless body from head to toe. "You let the bastards in and slaughtered all of the children of the academy. You left Sai to die and slit Ino's throat when she saved your life." As Naruto stopped beating the bitch and started to form a Rasengan in his left hand, angry tears started to well up in his eyes. With tears in his eyes, he said, "You killed Kakashi Sensei, and..." As the orb he was holding came full. "And you killed my love," he screamed angrily as he struck her face with the Rasengan. Sakura's body was reduced to a bloody lump by the time he was done with her. Naruto got to his feet, feeling no better than he had before his slaughter. He noticed something that stopped his heart as he surveyed the area he used to call home. A pale, ghostly specter of a man with orange spiky hair stood in front of him. His eyes were as lifelike as ever, and the Rinnegan's expressionless gaze still made Naruto feel cold. Nagato was staring at Naruto without expression. The words, "Naruto Uzumaki," were spoken by Nagato without emotion. He had the same appearance as when they had first met. Without responding, Naruto simply gazed at the spirit of the man to whom he had made his final and most important vow, that he would bring about genuine world peace. "I'm sorry," was Naruto's only response. Naruto went on, "I'm sorry I could not keep my promise," as Nagato continued to stare with an expression devoid of emotion. "I promised you I would bring peace to the world. I failed. There is no hope for peace now. The ninja are all dead except me. The lands will probably go to war with each other since there are no more ninja to keep them in check." Nagato remained silent, and Naruto became impatient. "Look, if you're here to gloat, then do it." "I failed. Naruto said, not wanting to be interrupted. "Naruto," Nagato said abruptly, his voice emotionless, "why did you fail?" "It's because I was naive. I thought that after Sasuke killed Itachi he would come home. But no, instead he continued his quest for vengeance. He teamed up with the Akatsuki to destroy Konoha and all the over villages. We might have been able to stop him if..." Naruto said, laughing bitterly, turning to face Nagato, whose face still appeared to be carved out of stone. He turned to look at the lump of meat that had once been Sakura's body. "So it was my fault. I, the child of prophecy, have brought the end of the kami-damned world. All the pain I suffered, the training to control the fox was all for nothing." Nagato said, "I see. So your bond to the Uchiha and your love for the girl blinded you from your goal," as he gave Naruto a pitying look. Naruto gave Nagato a look that would have killed him on its own if he had been alive. My bond to Sasuke did blind my judgment, but don't you ever say that I loved that backstabbing slut. Naruto grumbled. Nagato glanced at Naruto and calmly said, Naruto, I already knew what has happened. I have been watching you from the afterlife and I was pleased at the attempts you have tried to gain peace. The only thing that got in your way was the Uchiha and the, as so you put it, backstabbing slut. And those problems have indeed brought the end of peace. But if you had a chance to start again, would you do all in your power to prevent what has happened here today? Looking at Nagato, Naruto said, if I could have another chance, I would do everything in my power to stop Sasuke and bring about world peace. His expression was a mix of joy, sadness, and hope. Nagato grinned, which scared Naruto, and said, good, because I have found a way. Using my Rinnegan and the power I have been building, I could send your spirit back to the past, along with all your knowledge and experience. But be warned, your body in the past will not be strong enough to do all the things you can do now and you will be plagued with nightmares of today. Knowing this, will you still do all in your power to stop this future? However, Nagato was already aware of the blonde Hokage's next words. I will. I promise that I will stop the future by any means possible. This is a promise of a lifetime. The phrase, or two in your case, made Nagato laugh. He gestured toward Naruto with his uplifted hand. As he gazed around at the wreckage of his house, the blonde's Rinnegan eyes flashed and a white light surrounded him. As the light became the only thing Naruto could see, he thought, I swear I will protect those I love. I swear I'll make Hinata happy no matter what, he said, grinning to himself. I swear I'll change everything. Naruto let out a gasp. He nearly toppled over the swing he was perched on. When he blinked, he saw the tall, powerful ninja academy, not flattened and burned down. As he glanced around, he noticed a group of parents embracing their kids and sending, well done, or, congratulations, messages. He was aware of his location. He failed the Genin test for the third time on this particular day. The thought of, it worked, I'm in the past, made him smile. Thank you, Nagato, was Naruto's thought as he was relieved that it had worked. But going back to the present, Naruto realized he had to pretend to be depressed and stop grinning. Naruto caught a glimpse of Mizuki out of the corner of his eye. His blood froze. Naruto stormed through the main door of the academy. He needed to move quickly. He ran to his former classroom down the hallway. He saw a terrible scene when he swung the door open. Mizuki had Iruka by the throat, pressed against the wall, while Sakura had just finished cutting a young boy's throat. Mizuki, kill him, and once you're finished with Baka here, come and meet me at the main village gate, yelled Sakura as she saw him. After she had finished speaking, she leapt out of a window to get away. Mizuki noticed Naruto when he glanced over his shoulder. Ah, if it isn't the demon Hokage. Come to save your sensei? Well, too late. And Mizuki stabbed Iruka in the throat with his kunai before Naruto could stop him. Before Mizuki could blink, Naruto snapped his neck with a furious roar. Rushing to Iruka's side, he let the corpse fall. Iruka. Sensei, no. Naruto forced himself to focus on the here and now. He told himself, don't think about that. He had to stay focused. Look down in the dumps, he had to. The boy in question knew what he had to do as Mizuki moved silently behind Naruto. For the first time, he pretended to see Mizuki as he looked up. Naruto had to hold back from wringing his neck when he smiled at him. After several hours, Naruto saw the cabin and approached it as he entered the clearing carrying the forbidden scroll. Naruto was laughing in his head. Getting the scroll the second time was so damn easy that nobody would notice it was gone for at least 5 hours. He had plenty of time to put his skills to the test. He formed the ram symbol with his hands without even opening the scroll. He yelled, Shadow Clone Jutsu. There were about 100 clones in the clearing. He grinned to himself, or more accurately, to himself. What the hell? Why are we midgets? Exclaimed one of the clones. 1 minute we were standing in our old bright orange jumpsuit that said, please kill me, and the next we were talking with purple eyes. The clones appeared to have remembered him. In any case, some of them. Rather than providing an explanation, he blew out every clone and observed the smoke they created as he considered his next course of action. Naruto had been training hard, learning how to control the Kyuubi, expanding his knowledge, and concentrating solely on learning the hand sign jutsu since Nagato's invasion. Rasen Shrunken was the only jutsu he could perform because he had fallen so far behind in elemental manipulation. Although it was strong, it required too much chakra, and he concluded that shadow clones were becoming outdated since everyone was aware of his strategies. He thus studied many wind-style jutsus. He also discovered that earth was his secondary affinity, and thanks to his 9 tallied tenet, Naruto found another element by the time he was able to control the fox. Thus, Naruto had fire, wind, and earth jutsus perfected on that fateful day. A more serious person had taken his place, at least while he was on duty. The Fox Shuriken of the Leaf was his nickname. This was because he typically used a shuriken as the form for all of his manipulation jutsus that did not require hand signals. The part about the fox? Well, that much was clear. Naruto gave it some thought before deciding to try his hand at chakra control. Naruto left the forbidden scroll by the cabin and made his way to a tree. Naruto pondered whether he would need to relearn how to control his chakra as he arrived at its trunk. He started to climb the tree while clenching his teeth. With almost no effort, he walked up and down the tree, feeling relieved. Following his initial attempt, he applied a leaf to his forehead to make the exercise more challenging. As he walked up and down the tree, he had to make it float just a little bit off his forehead. He nearly laughed at how simple this was as well. After adding more items to float and balancing kunai on the tips of his fingers for 10 minutes, he came to the conclusion that his control was nearly flawless. In his mind, now for the real challenge. After putting his hands together and making a few hand gestures, he uttered the words, "Clone Jutsu." 10 clones followed him in the next second. He was about to give himself a pat on the back when he noticed a lone, pitiful image of himself on the clearing floor. With a grim expression, he sighed and pushed the clones away. He practiced the jutsu for 8 years, beginning when he was a genin, but he was still unable to perform it without creating a faulty clone. Naruto chose to test his other classic after pouting a little. He put his left arm out in front of him and started to concentrate, thinking he might as well try with one hand. In his hand, the familiar orb started to take shape, but upon closer inspection, he saw that the chakra was not spinning as quickly as it should have. Naruto approached a tree and slammed his unfinished Rasengan into its trunk, knowing what was about to happen. He cut a spiral pattern into the tree's bark instead of maintaining it, as was to be expected. He said thoughtfully, "If I use my right hand, that is probably going to happen." Naruto chose to try out his element manipulation instead of practicing the Rasengan because he knew he couldn't just display immense power right away. He picked up a stone and held it in his palm before concentrating his wind chakra. After a few minutes, he succeeded in making a sharp cut into the rock. Naruto frowned and made another attempt using a different stone. This time, the cut was deeper but still sharp. He made the decision to have his clones practice his other manipulations as well as chakra control exercises because he knew he needed to make it cut in half precisely. Even though he may have mastered chakra control, he still needs to boost his chakra reserves, even if just a little. He gazed up at the night sky filled with stars as he called forth more clones. He thought, this is going to take a long time. After 5 hours, leaping through the trees, Iruka was scouting Naruto's path. The fact that Naruto had taken the forbidden scroll infuriated and upset him. Although the boy has always played practical jokes, this was the most extreme. The act of stealing the scroll was punishable by death. Naruto must be upset that he has failed the genin exam for the 3rd time. Iruka sadly thought. He might just be doing this for a prank. He was going to speak with Naruto about this, that much was certain. With the small cabin in the center, he landed close to the clearing's edge. Just as Iruka was about to scream at Naruto, he saw what he was doing. The Chunin observed the blonde holding a stone in each hand, and he saw the stones shatter into 2 pieces. Although Iruka recognized that this was a wind manipulation exercise, he was baffled as to how the blonde was aware of it or how he managed to do it with 2 stones. A skill that only Junin could master. The words, "Iruka Sensei," from Naruto snapped him back to reality. He briefly noticed a mixture of joy and sadness in Naruto's face as his eyes welled up with tears. Iruka looked, but it was gone as fast as it had appeared. Was it his imagination? "Caught me already, huh, sensei?" he said, grinning nonchalantly. "Naruto, where did?" Iruka asked, glancing at him, but Naruto slashed out at him. "All right, Iruka Sensei, I'm going to show you this amazing jutsu, and you're going to let me graduate. That's the way it works, right?" "Huh?" Iruka exclaimed, taken by surprise. "Where did you get that idea?" she asked. "Mizuki Sensei told me about it. He told me where to get the scroll in this place." A puzzled expression fell on Naruto's face. "But I was surprised that I had to steal the forbidden scroll. I thought it was a capital offense to do that." Iruka saw a flash of metal out of the corner of his eye and exclaimed, "Look out," as he shoved Naruto aside as multiple kunai pinned him to the cabin wall. "It's Naruto, but I don't understand." After landing on his feet, Naruto observed Iruka's condition. He turned to see Mizuki standing on a tree limb, carrying 2 enormous shuriken, He grinned and remarked, "I see you found our hideaway." At that moment, Naruto had to restrain himself from ripping him from limb to limb. Iruka's arm was pierced by some of the kunai, and blood was dripping down his jacket when Naruto looked at him. "You basted. This was all a trick, wasn't it?" The statement, "You're not as dumb as you look, demon brat," made Mizuki laugh. As he screamed, "Naruto, get out of here. Take the scroll and get back to Konoha. I'll deal with this lying traitor." Iruka began removing the kunai and flung the first one to the ground. As Naruto was ready to pick up the scroll of the ground, Mizuki smirked evilly and said, "Oh, I'm the liar, Well, how about some truth then? Starting with you, demon." "Don't, Mizuki," was what Iruka heard Mizuki say as he was removing the fourth kunai. "They have been lying to you your whole life. Didn't you think it was strange how they treated you? Like dirt, like they hated you for just being alive?" Mizuki said, "What do you mean, lying about what?" in a startled tone as Naruto feigned to halt in shock and turn to face her. However, Naruto's thoughts were along the lines of, "God, I detest this acting. I wish I could kill him right now, but I have to wait a little while. One thing is for sure, though. I will not allow him to harm Iruka again. They lied when they said that the fourth had killed the Kyuubi. You can't kill a demon. So they sealed it into a newborn infant." In an attempt to prevent Mizuki from telling Naruto the truth, Iruka was frantically drawing the kunai. Mizuki merely yelled, "That newborn infant was you. You are the 9-tallied fox," in response to his order to stop it. "I already knew that you basted and you're wrong. I am not the Kyuubi, and even if I were, I'd still be a better person than you if I am truly a demon. If I am truly a demon, at least I would not be whatever you are. You backstabbing basted. You betrayed your own village, even trying to kill one of your comrades. You may call me a demon, but you're nothing more than a selfish monster." He glanced at Naruto to see the impact this would have on him. "Try and hurt my sensei again and I will kill you." The blonde prepared himself as he picked up a kunai that Iruka had pulled out to free himself. Mizuki chuckled, but was taken aback by the blonde's transformation in front of him. "Let's see you try, show me what you can do, 9-tallied fox," he said. With a sly smile, Naruto raised his hands to form the ram seal, multi-shadow clone jutsu, while still holding the kunai. "These aren't illusions, they're solid clones," Iruka thought, blinking as hundreds, if not thousands, of Narutos appeared in the clearing. "He has mastered an advanced jutsu," Iruka thought. Mizuki landed on his ass after falling off the branch in shock. He began to whimper and mutter for forgiveness. The clones shouted, "If you're not common," and then they all leapt into the air in Mizuki's direction. As the clones puffed into smoke during the mid-jump, creating a large smoke screen, he attempted to stand and was attempting to draw out one of his shuriken. Mizuki had begun to chuckle at Naruto's incapacity, but it was short-lived as the blonde emerged from the smoke holding the kunai. Mizuki misjudged Naruto, and now the blonde put a kunai in his throat, turning everything black. Iruka was unable to see what was going on. Had Mizuki been vanquished by Naruto? Or had he been killed by Mizuki? The blood in Iruka ran cold. Naruto would have been at fault if he had perished. He ought to have engaged him earlier and prevented him from charging Mizuki. Then Iruka heard a high-pitched cry of agony. As the smoke dissipated, he saw Naruto standing in front of Mizuki's body. Blood was all over his hands. Sasuke felt irritated. He felt more than irritated. He was furious. Sasuke had to endure a blonde-haired dobi, a one-eyed pervert, and, last but not least, a pink-haired and screechy-voiced banshee ever since they were placed on the same team. Naruto, also known as the dobi, was a loser who constantly boasted and pouted. He was more helpful than Sakura, who watched him from the sidelines, staring like a fool, but the baka in question was simply too dim-witted. How on earth had he turned into a ninja? He may never find the answer to this question, which will haunt him until the day he dies. Although the perverted Cyclops, Kakashi, to avoid confusion, is a respected and powerful shinobi, the Uchiha saw him as a late bastard who was lazy and fond of pornography. He had only taught them how to climb trees, something Sasuke discovered should have been taught to them prior to the mission. Then there was the incredibly annoying Haruno, who simply could not convince her that he had no interest in her because of her thick skull. He didn't have time for pointless dates. In order to murder his brother, he had to get stronger. However, the pink-haired Kunoichi continued to try her unsuccessful purist. Sakura was still chasing him like a dog as he left after his D-rank mission. She tried to gauge him in conversation, but he ignored her. The pink-haired woman blushed as she stumbled out, "So Sasuke. He was angry because of this. She had asked him out for the 100th time today. Sasuke had actually counted the times she asked and he said no because he was so irritated. Sasuke had the perfect solution to keep her out of his hair for the time being, so enough is enough. Sakura, I need to tell you something, the Raven headed Avenger said coolly as he turned to face Sakura. Cha, about time, cried Sakura's inner voice as she blushed and shook her fist at him, thinking that he was finally going to ask her out. Smirking, Sasuke declared, I'm gay. Quiet. Konoha appeared to slow down as the silence lingered. As Sakura's mind gradually processed what she had just heard, the minutes seemed to stretch into hours. She repeated herself, unwilling to believe it, you're, without emotion. Gay, she cried, her voice so high, pitched and screeching that it broke glass in Iwa. For a brief moment, Sasuke was deaf and cursed himself for forgetting how loudly she screamed. Yes, no need to yell about it, he said, still grinning. Sakura's mind went into overdrive. He identified as gay, until a terrible thought occurred to me. These words kept repeating themselves. A terrible idea that can't be real. Do you like Naruto? She asked weakly, breathing heavily. I may be gay, but I'm not desperate, Sasuke smirked, and his smirk turned into a smile that was both unusual and frightening. But I must admit, he is very cute. A lot cuter than you, I dare say, he said. He observed the expression on the pink-haired's face. Silence once more. Not only did this silence permeate Konoha, but it persisted until Iwa. Kakashi was not giggling, Killer Bee was not rapping, and Naruto was not boasting about becoming Hokage one day. Sakura was now mentally unstable and her brain was broken. Cuter than you. You are not as cut as Naruto. All that remained of her shattered mind were these words. She went white as she turned her back on Sasuke. She uttered the terrible words, he's cutter than me, and continued to walk away. A rare smile appeared on Sasuke's face as he stood there. He congratulated himself on his lie and kept walking home. In fact, she purchased it. She is truly stupid. How could I possibly find Naruto cute? The idea made him shudder. He turned a corner as he approached and saw at least 30 girls. Sasuke we never knew. They cried when they saw him, and he arched an eyebrow at this unknown thing. His gaze then landed on one of the girls' shirts. After urinating on his pants, the Avenger started to flee for his life. On the girls' shirts, it says Yaoi Club Konoha. The Uchiha was angry first. He was terrified now. As he sat on his bed, Naruto thought about what had happened today. The blonde had feigned shock at Naruto's actions after he had killed Mizuki. His acting had deceived Iruka, but... Rewind flash. They stood silently, Iruka staring at the blonde, Naruto staring at the ground. Iruka finally inquired, so how long? Naruto knew that he was referring to the Kyuubi. 2 years or so. I went to see the old man at his office, but he wasn't there so I waited for him. I looked around the office and I found a box with my name on it. I looked in the box and found a letter from my father. Your father? Iruka asked, her eyes widening in surprise, and Naruto nodded. Who was he? After hesitating, Naruto chose to be honest with him. He was forced to. The aforementioned box was authentic. It was left for him by his father, who requested that the third not give it to him until he turned into a chunin. Only while drinking with Tsunade had he discovered it. Along with a letter informing him that he was a Jinchuriku, which he already knew from Mizuki. Bastard. That his father was the fourth, which he already knew from the battle with Nagato's alter ego Pain. And about his mother, the box also included a list of all of his father's signature jutsus, such as the Flying Thunder God, which he didn't know, the Summoning Jutsu, which he already knew that one too, and the Rasengan, which he already knew that. Naruto had chosen to keep it a secret in order to gradually increase his strength without anyone noticing, but since Iruka witnessed him performing the dual stone cutting exercise, he must explain how he knew and carried it out. After all, it was an exercise at the Junin level. My father was Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage. Iruka's jaw fell open. What? He exclaimed, unintentionally using his large head jutsu. Naruto winced because this caused Iruka's voice to grow louder, and he was standing directly beside him. Ow, geez Iruka. Sensei, no need to shout, Iruka said. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I find it hard to believe, after realizing his error. Tell me how else I can do a Junin level exercise then, Naruto interrupted. What are you? Iruka asked Naruto, and then it dawned on him. You mean when you cut those rocks in half? Naruto nodded and continued. Yes, my father left me some chakra exercises to help me be a better shinobi. But back to how I know I am a Jinchuriku. The fourth told me in the letter that I was sealed with the 9 tails. He said he was sorry for all the pain he must have caused me. He explained it was either that or me and the entire village would be destroyed by the fox. He also told me that about my mother Kushina Uzumaki, what she was like and all the things she liked. Naruto grinned as a real tear ran down his cheek. Odd thing is, that one of her favorite things was to eat ramen. Iruka said, "Sorry Naruto. I shouldn't have," after giving him a startled and dejected look. "No, it's all right. You were only curious," Naruto said, shaking his head. The blonde wiped the tear from his cheek and went on, "At first I was angry at my father, but then decided that he was right." Iruka was taken aback by Naruto's composed and determined expression. If he had not done what he did, none of us would be standing here today. He did his duty as Hokage and I would have done the same. To protect those who I cherish and love. Naruto said with a sigh. After that I decided to work harder, but not at the academy. I decided to practice the exercises that my father had left me. It was hard at first, but I quickly got the hang of some of them, like what you saw me do. Iruka was staring at Naruto with suspicion when he looked up into his face. All that time when you acted like an idiot these past years was an act, wasn't it? Naruto asked. Following Naruto's nod, Iruka turned to face him and asked, "But why?" His response was, "Every time I did something smart they would just ignore me. If I knew the answer to a question they would just pretend my hand wasn't raised. If I did well on a test they would say I cheated. So being the idiot was the only way to get attention at the time." After nodding, Iruka scowled and asked, "So did you intentionally fail the test then?" While Iruka continued to look suspicious, Naruto looked shocked and quickly responded, "No, I didn't fail it on purpose. I can't do the clone jutsu. Seriously, I can't. I think I've got too much chakra. That's why I could perform so many shadow clones," Naruto said. Iruka did something he never thought he would do. He nodded at Naruto logic. Iruka said, "But how about all the pranks you pulled off?" Iruka looked at Naruto and laughed. "Well, I just like to pull pranks. They're fun and it is my way of getting payback." Naruto smiled, not his typical foxy grin, but a typical one you would see on anyone's face. "Hey Naruto, I've got something for you. Close your eyes." End of flashback. Still sitting on his bed, Naruto smiled to himself. For safety, he had stored Iruka's headband on his bedside table. Seeing the man he considers his father was pleasant to him. His mind then turned to all of his other friends and family members, including Gaara, Neji, Kiba, and most significantly, Hinata. With a sigh, Naruto considered his beloved. Now was not the time to see her again, even though he really wanted to. Then Naruto started to consider his next move. He got out of bed and checked his calendar. He approached it and wrote down the day he would be assigned to Team 7. The date was precisely 1 week away. Then, for the first time, Naruto focused on Sasuke. Naruto was aware that talking to Sasuke would not be enough to change him. Sasuke had to slow down for him to learn the meaning of true strength. Thus, the blonde made the decision to prevent Sasuke from obtaining the Sharingan. When they went on the wave mission, he could do that with ease. Naruto was aware that he had to prevent Sasuke from ever receiving Orochimaru's curse mark. But what if he didn't succeed? What if, in the Valley of the End, he had to battle him once more? Easy. He would murder him. Naruto had no qualms about killing Sasuke because he had long since stopped considering him a brother. Not what he did afterward. The blonde won't be constrained by any promises. His mind immediately conjured up a picture of a pink, agitated girl. The wall was dented when the Jinchuriku punched the calendar out of rage. Naruto turned on his heel and made his way back to his bed, thinking, "I'll burn that bridge when I come to it." He put on his pajamas, surveyed his body, and muttered, "First things first, I'm going to do some workouts." He sat down in bed and thought, and if it's tomorrow, I have to take my pictures for my ninja profile. I have to decide what to teach Konohamaru. Because. He moved into a more comfortable position and closed his eyes, saying, "The sexy jutsu is just wrong. Although it is much more difficult to learn, my new perverted jutsu is far superior." "You like Sakura, don't you? Said Naruto, continuing to gaze at Sakura's retreating back. He was going to leave to report to Kakashi when Sai unexpectedly asked him a question. "I read it in a book. People smile around those they love." "Yes, they do, Sai. But love comes in many forms. I see Sakura as my sister, if anything else." "It's more a sibling love," Naruto said, turning his head to face Sai with a puzzled look on his face. "Like you see Sasuke as a brother?" The blonde gave a nod. He sighed as he gazed up at the sky. "Yeah, like Sasuke." He turned to face Sai and remarked, I used to like Sakura, but she will always like Sasuke over me. He took a deep breath. Yeah, why like the dumb fool? Just look for a smart, handsome guy no matter how much of a dick he is. With one of his emotionless smiles, Sai turned to face Naruto and said, "Don't worry Dickless, you'll find someone. You've got a better chance than me. I can barely feel emotion let alone understand it." Ignoring the dick less remark, Naruto turned to face his teammate and responded with a roll of his eyes and a lot of sarcasm, saying, "Yeah Sai. I mean the civilian girls would really want to go out with the demon their parents told them about, and all the kunoichi would really queue up for a chance with the dead last loser." Naruto's expression softened and he kept saying, "Sai, you've got loads more of a chance than me. You're strong, have a good sense of common sense, and you're loyal. Sure you can't show, feel or read emotion and you're slightly creepy. But Sakura is helping you and you're making amazing progress and you're not so creepy anymore. Face it, all that is stopping you is that you don't talk to anyone." Sai raised his eyebrows. "Was that sarcasm? Never thought you'd use it, there was so much of it even I noticed it. And that bit at the end, when did you become such an expert at relationships? See? People always assume things about me. They judge me for what I was and underestimate me. That's why people will always treat me like an idiot. But I would rather be seen as an idiot if being smart required me to break promises and forget about my friends," Naruto said with a bitter laugh. The first time he had heard Naruto speak in this manner, Sai raised an eyebrow. It seems he thought that deep down inside him is someone who is serious and calculating. If he is like that, what other things are you hiding, Naruto Uzumaki? The sound of pots breaking and a lot of swearing interrupted him. When Naruto and Sai turned around, they saw a platinum blonde kunoichi stooping to pick up various gardening tools and dropped flower pots. "Damn it, ignorant father, attempting to put all the work on me while he's out having fun with Shika's father. Heh. I think I might try that. If it works I can rub it in his face about how I was right, and if I'm wrong, well he can say he was right," Naruto said, pausing briefly to think before offering assistance. Then, with one hand on Sai's back, Naruto leaned into his ear and said, "Now's your chance." He then shoved him forward, directly at Ino, who yelled and steadied himself before catching Ino's attention and exclaiming, "Whoa! Watch where you're going." Naruto shivered and said, "Please don't freeze up, please don't freeze up." Sai remained motionless. "I apologize for that," Sai said after taking a deep, soothing breath. He glanced down at the pot and tool mess and said, "What happened here? I was running too fast and I tripped over a stray rock. You didn't drop this because of me, did you?" "No," Ino said, shaking her head. She looked down and rubbed her forehead, saying, "Kami, this stuff is heavy. My father usually carries this stuff from the village gate back to our flower shop, but he made up some excuse, so mother sent me instead. I'm shocked that dad could carry all of this, even for a ninja." Then, with a normal smile instead of his eerie one, Sai asked, "Do you need any help?" "Yes, please Ino nodded enthusiastically as she looked up at him, but then she looked disappointed and said, "Wait. No, I really don't want to bother you." However, Sai simply bowed and responded, "There is absolutely no issue. Anything to support such a lovely woman as you." "Oh." The compliment made her flush. "Well, if you insist." She then accompanied Sai in collecting all of the pots and tools that were undamaged. Naruto noticed the slight red stain that formed on Sai's cheek and the flush on Ino's face as they both reached for the final instrument their hands touched. It wasn't a complete flush, but it was a start. After they straightened up with their arms full of bags, Ino kissed Sai on the cheek and said, "Thanks very much. By the way, my name is Ino." With a red stain all over his cheek, he said, "Sai, it's a pleasure to meet you Ino-san." With that, they left, walking hand in hand while toting the heavy load. After seeing this, Naruto had a mental breakdown. Jinchuriku Matchmaking. 1. Recently hired boyfriend with artistic talent, 0. Newly hired Jinchuriku boyfriend without dick, 1. A seasoned lover of the arts, 1. Holding Hinata Hyuga's gentle hand, Naruto smiled sheepishly at Sai's remark. Ino and Sai, who had been together for at least 2 years, were standing in front of Konoha's southern gate. The lavender-eyed heiress had come to welcome Naruto home from a training trip to Kumo and Suna. 2 years had passed since Pain's defeat and Madara's announcement of the Fourth Great Ninja War, during which Naruto had been sent to Kumo to learn how to control the nine-tailed fox. He was supposed to return a year ago, by which point he should have mastered his tenet, but for some reason, Naruto insisted on staying in the Sand Village for an additional year. The hospitable trio saw Naruto as soon as he arrived on the road to the village, and just as Ino and Sai were about to greet him, Hinata rushed out and glomped him, ensnaring him in a passionate kiss. Sai just stood there grinning, but Ino was completely taken aback by this. Holding Hinata's hand, the blonde ninja said, "First off, I'm not dickless. Second, we were going out before I left. Finally, but just as importantly, when were you experienced?" Everyone laughed, including Hinata, who joined in the fun rather than lingering in the background. "Well, I must say," said Ino, "I never really knew Hinata was that forward." "Nor did I," the heiress said without stuttering at all, "but I just couldn't wait to see you again." She then planted a kiss on Naruto's lips, which Naruto returned, intensifying the kiss. "Sorry to interrupt, but me and my girlfriend and I would like to know when you guys became an item," argued Sai. "What?" Naruto and Hinata split up and gave them both the evils. The platinum blonde reapplied, "We're interested in the specifics." "Okay Ino," Hinata sighed, turning to Naruto, "Later?" "Definitely." He smiled and kissed her on the cheek. Then he faced the others and said, "Remember what transpired during the invasion?" Both Sai and Ino gave a nod. "You also recall my return from confronting pain?" After straining her face to recall, Sai abruptly interrupted, saying, "Yeah, when all the villagers threw you in the air and when Sakura tried to hug you. Yeah, she tried to punch you first but you dodged so she hit Kakashi instead, knocking him out cold." A puzzled expression returned to Ino's face as she said, "But right after that the others started throwing you in the air." She bit her lip in concentration and added, "Well except for Hinata who just vanished." It seems that 2 years with Ino finally broke through Sai's emotional barrier, as he then had a big, "oh," on his face. "That was a shadow clone, wasn't it?" Naruto replied, "I wanted to speak to Hinata in private, so she and me went to the only place that was not ruined, the Hokage faces. There I told him about how I always had liked him and believed in him," Hinata added, looking down at the ground with a hint of sadness in her eyes. "He did not respond at first and I thought he had rejected me and so I started mumbling about how I was so sorry for being selfish and was about to leave when," she said, staring off into space dreamily as she looked up at her audience of 2 who were listening with rapt attention. "He practically swept me off my feet and kissed me in the light of the sunset. He whispered in her ear, 'And nor shall I my little sunshine.' Point 1, which made her blush and laugh. After that, Naruto went on, we began spending time together because we couldn't go on a date because the village was destroyed. However, I had to depart for my training trip after those Kumo ninjas arrived, as you are aware, and so on. But I've been able to stay in touch with her all this time because of my new toad friend Kaide." Ino laughed. "I thought you'd never notice that Hinata has the hots for you." "Ditto." Sai nodded. "Naruto, may I ask why you traveled to Suna following your training with Killer B.San?" With a sigh, Naruto said, "Well, if you want to know, why don't you ask Pineapple Head over there?" and gestured to a black, harried ninja wearing a Junin vest behind Ino and Sai. "Why did you introduce me to Naruto? So troublesome," Shikamaru said in a frustrated tone, but a "welcome back" smile was visible on his face. "First off, before I begin this bothersome explanation, news?" he asked, looking into Naruto's face as he strode from the shadows into the light, passing Ino and Sai before coming to a stop in front of the blonde and the lavender-eyed girl who was still holding on to his arm. "Good or bad?" was Naruto's smile. "Good." As they watched, Ino, Sai, and Hinata wondered what the news was. "It's a boy." Those words took a few moments to sink in. Ino appeared perplexed as light bulbs appeared over Sai's and Hinata's heads, both of which flashed brilliant yellow lights in comprehension. "Welsh. Light please." He scowled as he looked up after Sai's sudden departure. I sigh and clap my hands twice, muttering, "Okay. Stupid clapper mechanism." He gave me the thumbs up when his light bulb turned on once more, "Thanks Welsh." Naruto and the others gave him a humorous, bewildered look and said, Sai? Who the hell is Welsh?" He turned to the slothful boy and said, Never mind, so Shika. How come we weren't invited to the wedding?" After giving Sai a crazy look and asking, "What the hell are you?" Ino's realization dawned. She noticed the slight remnant of a tight band or ring on the Shika's ring finger when she looked at his hand. She yelled, "You married Tamari," and everyone in the vicinity shuddered. Shikamaru recovered first and breathed a sigh. "You had to blab Naruto. Yes, we have been married for at least 11 months now. I had to do it in secret due to her brothers, her suitors and Tsunade. Gaara was fine when he found out but Kankuro went nuts. I was almost at the receiving end of his Iron Maiden move, but Naruto saved my ass. Naruto touched a spot on his shoulder. Damn straight, he nailed me with so much poison. If Gaara hadn't sent that puppet boy flying, or if Foxy hadn't healed me, I would be a walking pincushion. And let's not forget the suitors. Lovesick bastards would have killed me if Baki Sensei hadn't taught me Wind Sword. Shikamaru nodded. Yeah, one of them was a samurai from the land of tea. That blonde bastard killed all the others and would have got me too if Naruto hadn't learned that jutsu. Baki Sensei, wasn't he the one who trained Gaara and his siblings? Ino asked, looking perplexed. Yep, replied the brunette. He was the best wind jutsu expect in the sand besides from Tamari, but she was married and was having a baby. He taught me not only Wind Sword but also a vast variety of ranged jutsus as well. Here, watch. After that, Naruto approached a tree, turned to face it, and extended his arm out to the side. Wind Chakra suddenly materialized and coiled tenderly around his hand as he crossed his thumb over his palm and yelled, Wind Sword. The tree was then sliced into pieces by his repeated slashing motions. He then leapt back, passing through hand signals, and exclaimed, Vacuum bullets, as he landed. Balls of air shot from his mouth, flew in the direction of the tree segments, and blasted them to ash. It turns out that I have a secondary affinity that's Earth, and lucky me that Gaara's girlfriend Matsuri has that certain element in the bag, Naruto said with a smile. Earth style. Mud wall jutsu, he yelled after slamming his hand to the ground. In front of Naruto, a wall of mud rose from the earth, rising to a height of several feet or more. Then, with his arms folded in front of his face and his fingers spread wide, Naruto prepared himself for a shuriken stance. A number of Chunin, and villagers had gathered to witness this amazing display of power, but Naruto was too preoccupied with his performance to notice them. But what I am most proud of from this training is that I have made a new, no hand sign required jutsu, he said, grinning broadly as he continued on his expectations. He then closed his eyes and focused. In between his fingers, more wind chakra started to form. They started to churn and take on the forms of shuriken. Opening his eyes, Naruto gazed at the mud wall in front of him. Wind style. Wind shuriken, was his shout as he leapt into the air. The shuriken then flew out from between his fingers as he started to flex his wrist outward in midair. After striking the wall, the shuriken emerged on the other side. The wall was now punctured with 6 shuriken-shaped holes. However, Naruto wasn't done yet. Another batch started to appear as soon as the first one left his hands. When he flexed his wrists once more, the freshly constructed shuriken came next. One volley followed by another, and still another. The mud wall soon had thousands of holes in it, and it was nearly falling apart. Landing on the ground, Naruto marveled at his handiwork. Then, with a click of his fingers, the entire wall collapsed, with the debris landing at his feet. He was shocked to see so many people when he turned around. All they did was stand and gaze. That was awesome. Madara has no chance. And, way to go Naruto. Senpai, were all exclaimed by the audience as they applauded and clapped. Naruto scratched his head and smiled. Hinata emerged from the crowd and embraced him, saying, Naruto-kun, that was incredible. Not as amazing as you are, Hinata-chan, Naruto said with a smile and a cheek kiss. Ino and the others are heading to the ramen stand. They're waiting for us. Ino still wants to hear your story about what happened in Suna, and Shika wants to know the bad news, she whispered, blushing and kissing him back on the lips. Naruto nodded, and he and Hinata hurried through the throng of new admirers and fans of Naruto to the ramen stand, where a lazy genius, an impatient artist, and an impatient blonde awaited their arrival. There you are, Ino groaned, crossing her arms. I'm sorry to bother you, but Shika doesn't want to discuss, she said, looking around to see if anyone else was saying. Anyway, why didn't you tell us earlier about that thing? I mean, I know you were far away, but you could have told Hinata about it, so why didn't you? As is his custom when he feels anxious, Naruto scratched the back of his head and said, well, I was going to tell Hinata, but Shika asked me not to. I did so, on one condition. And that was? Sai asked. He'd teach me how to play shogi. Teach you how to play shogi? But everyone knows how to play shogi, asked Sai, raising an eyebrow as Ino looked stunned. Sai hit himself in the head as Naruto bit his lip and said, well, I never had someone to play it with me when I was younger. He didn't remember Naruto's early years, when he was always by himself. He never played shogi, of course. And I wanted to find a hobby I could do in my free time, and shogi seemed to be the best option at the time. Shika then kicked in. Yes, and you weren't as bad as I thought you'd be. You beat Gaara and Baki at it, quite skillfully if I might add. Yeah, Naruto chuckled, but I failed to beat you at it. Shikamaru laughed. True, and I look forward to the day you beat me, that is if you ever do. Naruto was beaming. I will beat you, Shika, even if I grow old with age and the last thing I ever do is defeat you at your own game. Yes, but what's the bad news that you were going to tell Shika? Ino then butted in. Shika stiffened at this, his ears ready to hear. Trying to appear serious, Naruto started, well, the bad news is. There was no sound as the moment stretched into what seemed like hours, and time froze as it passed. Ino holding Sai's hand, Hinata staring at Naruto with a look of dread and anticipation, and Shika bracing herself for the worst. He's blonde. Sale appeared irritated, Ino furious, and Hinata punched Naruto's shoulder while shouting, what was the point in the suspense, you idiot? Sai stared at him in confusion and asked, why is that troublesome? Shika, however, slapped his forehead and muttered, damn, that's troublesome. He pointed to Ino, saying, she yells at me and wakes me up all the time, to Naruto, saying, he is a fool who keeps telling me to work and focus, and he was loud as hell back in the day, to Hokage Tower, saying, Tsunade keeps giving me work, and finally to Suna, saying, and finally that iterating samurai who tried to shish kebab me. Also there's Tamari, but she is worth the hassle. Then he turned to see Naruto inserting a note into the mouth of a yellow summing toad after hearing a slight popping sound. What are you doing? Naruto looked up with a grin. I'm writing out what you just said so Tamari knows how you feel about the baby. Kaide, here is just about to leave for Suna. He is very fast at delving messages, so Tamari should know how you feel in about 10 minutes. Please, don't send it, Shika said, pale. And if I don't? Naruto asked with a quick flash of his foxy smile. They were standing next to a ramen stand when Shika said, I will pay for your ramen for a year. With a fictitious, I'm considering it, expression, Naruto uttered, Mabi, about the same way. After saying, deal, and nodding, Naruto took the note from Kaide's mouth and ripped it to pieces. 2 years. Sai laughed with the others, and they laughed, and they laughed, and they laughed. As he ran after Sakura, Naruto exploded out of the academy wall, his eyes wailing for the blood of the pink bitch. She ran as fast as she could, but Naruto was catching up quickly. He shouted, Wind Shuriken, and splayed his fingers before throwing them back at the bitches who were running away. She screamed in agony and fell headfirst towards the pavement after it struck her mid-jump. Sakura, what happened? What hit you? And why were you running? The blonde girl asked, utterly unaware of what the girl she had just saved had done, as Naruto landed on a rooftop and witnessed Ino catching the traitor before she hit the ground. Naruto shouted, Ino. Watch out, to Ino. What do you? Ino asked, looking up at Naruto, but Sakura's next words were muffled when she grabbed her from behind and snapped her neck. Sakura dogged it by backflipping out of the way as Naruto roared in rage, leapt down from the roof, and kicked her in the head. Ino. What's taking so long? Sai called as he left the building at that precise moment, but he was stopped when he noticed Ino's body on the ground with blood streaming from her nose. How could you? She was your friend. He roared, glaring up at Sakura with a look of venomous hatred. No, Sakura said, glancing at Sai, she was only a competitor for Sasuke. Kun's affection, which will soon be mine. Images flashed through Naruto's mind as he balled his fists and said, you bloody bitch. How could you love him after what he did? Don't they mean anything to you? He yelled, his eyes glowing blood red, as Shino's broken glasses smashed into a puddle of mud. Akamaru howled over his best friend's body. Tamari sobbed with a bloody bundle in her arms, and Gaara, kneeling on the floor with nothing but mud dripping from his face and his sand armor. She turned to Sai and threw a paper bomb in his face, saying, I don't care. Those people should have just bowed down to him. She sneered at them. Just like you will before he kills you, you stupid demon. Sai attempted to dodge the bomb, but it was too powerful to avoid. The shockwave knocked down the building around Sai's ears and sent him flying into the one from which he had just emerged. As Sakura started to jump in the direction of the southern village gate, Naruto noticed this and hurried to his friend's aid. Naruto thought, wind sword, and swiftly crossed his thumbs over each palm of his hands before starting to chop the debris into pieces. Soon after, he discovered Sai with his left arm crushed by the falling debris and his face severely burned. When Naruto knelt next to Sai and attempted to pick up his debris, Sai croaked, don't bother. Even if you got it off, I wouldn't have the will to fight. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I failed Ino. If I had been faster, I could have stopped her. Naruto paused. glancing down at Sai's burnt face. He clenched his fist, yelled, "Damn it," and punched the ground with all of his strength. His face lit up with rage. He screamed, "Why? Why do all the people I consider my brother or sister betray me? Why does everyone I care about die when I could have saved them?" He then punched the ground once more, his body exploding with red chakra. "That's it, brat. Give in to your anger and use my power. Avenge all who have fallen and finally crush those insects you called siblings of the face of the planet." With his fist pressed to the floor, Naruto stood there. After what seemed like hours, the red chakra finally subsided, and he got to his feet, thinking, "No fox. I have my own strength, and besides, I want to kill those two myself. I will not rely on your power to see me through, as I stated all those years ago." He then knelt down to Sai, who was slowly passing away, and said in a whisper, "Sai. Please, Naruto," he said, raising his only arm to silence him. "Let me speak. I would like to share these final words with you. Before I met you." Sai coughed up blood, his face going ghostly white, but Naruto nodded and leaned in close to hear his final words. "I was just a weapon, a tool that Danzo could use however he pleased. But because of you." He coughed once more, this time with more blood, and it was obvious that his time was running out. "You taught me the value of friendship and the strength that comes from it." He then grinned, a genuine smile full of joy and appreciation, saying, "You introduced me to Ino. You helped show me what love was like, and so." His eyes started to flutter, and he was just a few seconds away from his demise. "I am proud." His eyes closed just before he whispered his final words, "To call you my Hokage." Naruto remained there, kneeling beside one of his real friends, a tear streaming down his cheek, but he wiped it away and got to his feet, his face set with grim resolve, promising, "Sai." He glanced at Ino, before turning to face Sakura's direction. "Everyone. I swear to you all." He then roared, drawing his trademark Hiruzen shuriken, saying, "I will kill Sasuke and Sakura for what they did to you." Then, with the blatant murder still in his eyes, he leapt after Sakura. As he jumped from building to building, his mind shifted to Hinata, who was announcing the invasion, and he exclaimed, "Hinata, if both of us make it through this, then I would say, yes." Blood began to spread out of the roof as he landed on a rooftop overlooking the southern gate, and Naruto screamed in shock and struggled, but the blood quickly covered his entire body, making it impossible for him to move. Then another pillar of blood rose from the rooftop floor, and it molded itself into the shape of Sasuke, who was smiling maniacally. In a demonic voice, it cooed, "This is entirely your fault. You ought to have recognized her treachery and taken action. However, you didn't, and as a result, all of your friends have passed away, and for that." Then it stabbed itself in the chest and produced a sword that resembled Sasuke's, saying, "You must pay the ultimate prize." And he struck Naruto's head with the sword. The dream, or nightmare, had been so real that Naruto half expected the bloody Sasuke to show up out of nowhere and take his head, but instead he looked down at the mattress and pondered as he jerked awake, breathing heavily and with perspiration on his brow. He looked up, his chin held high, and grinned, "So these are the nightmares that will haunt me, Well, if that's it, then I'm disappointed. These nightmares need to improve if they want to wear me down." He said, "Well, I think it's time to begin my training," after checking the time, which was 5 in the morning. He then hurried to his closet and opened it, revealing another orange jumpsuit. "I need to be strong if I want to change what happened at the bridge." He put on his clothes and exclaimed, "After I've done enough training and helped Konohamaru, I'm going to buy some new clothes and visit Hinata while I'm at it." He hurried to the door after finishing his clothes, deciding to have ramen later rather than now. He opened the door and glanced back at his messy apartment, which had dust bunnies and instant ramen cups all over the floor. "And also clean up this mess. The fact that I lived like a pig is unbelievable." He slammed the door after saying that. In a random training ground, Naruto passed out. At 7 in the morning, Naruto had just completed an extremely taxing workout that included 150 push-ups, sit-ups, squats, and other exercises in addition to 500 runs around the village. Naruto started muttering curses at Guy for putting him in this pattern. In order to be as fit as possible for the Uchiha, he had worked out with Guy and bushy brows every morning and evening in the future. Naruto reminded himself that he needed to be in peak physical condition when he faced Haku and his demon sensei, Zabuza, as he started to feel his limbs again. After carefully getting up, Naruto made the decision to take a 5. He took out a pen and paper, sat down by a tree, and started sketching the training area. Naruto began drawing as a way to exercise his imagination and maintain his composure. After Naruto lost to Shikamaru for the umpteenth time, Sai showed him some basic techniques and suggested it to him. For once, he had a real pastime that he could do anywhere. 5 minutes later, he marched into the center of the training area and put away his drawing. He called forth a group of clones and gave them orders to attack. He practiced his taijutsu for the next 30 minutes. He combined Jiraiya's personal style, Guy's powerful fist, and the technique the Toads had taught him. It was a combination of charges and counterattacks with a bone-breaking attack and a robust defense. It came naturally to him, but it would take some time for him to regain proficiency in the more complex attacks. Naruto chose to test his jutsus after using an uppercut to eliminate the final clone. Gazing at a tree, he shouted, "Wind style. Air bullet jutsu," while making hand gestures at the speed of light. As a result, Naruto released a wind bullet that was precisely shaped. The tree was sliced in two, and it fell in Naruto's direction. Saying, "Earth style. Mud wall jutsu," and putting his hand on the ground, he swore and made more hand gestures. The tree was stopped in its tracks by a wall of mud that rose up. "Fire style. Fireball jutsu," was yelled in Naruto's mind as he made more hand signals, but instead of a fireball, flames ignited, burning the tree. Unfortunately for the blonde, as they left, the flames burned his mouth. With a cry of agony, he dashed into the woods that surrounded the training ground. He located the stream in a flash and lowered his head into it. Anger was also visible on his now wet face. He said aloud to no one in particular, "Looks like I need to work on my fire manipulation. My wind and earth are fine thanks to the amount of training I did last night." Even though they were only C rank, it was a good sign. After wiping his face, Naruto spent the following hour honing his fire manipulation skills with his shadow clones. Given that his burn was now throbbing excruciatingly, Naruto gave up after an hour and made the decision to practice it later. He made the decision to take a short nap because he knew it would take some time to heal. He dreamed about the best moments of his life while lying down by the river. For example, when Konohamaru gave him his gift for becoming Hokage, when he kissed Hinata for the first time on top of Hokage Mountain, when Iruka gave him his headband, and when he defeated Neji and the entire crowd cheered. When the door of the Hokage's office exploded open, revealing Konohamaru and his group, Naruto was seated in his chair facing the window. Naruto turned in his chair and said, "Hey boss. Is it true?" he demanded of the young genin. After a moment of contemplation, Naruto got up and walked around the desk. "If it's that I have slept with Hinata, no if it's that have I beaten Shikamaru in shogi, also no but I'm close damn it," he said. "If it's had me become Hokage, then hell yes," he said, grinning, as he came to a stop directly in front. "What about our promise to fight over the Hokage ship?" Konohamaru said, acting hurt. Naruto saw right through this and ruffled the younger version of himself's hair, saying, "Well, if you do defeat me then becoming Hokage will be a given." "Guess you're right boss." Konohamaru smiled at this. "We got something to give to you, right guys," he said, turning to his teammates. After both of them nodded, the person known as Udon took out a scroll and set it on the floor. Naruto glared at the scroll and asked, "What is it?" The statement, "You'll see," from Konohamaru did not reassure Naruto. He wouldn't rule out them playing a practical joke on him. They all chimed, "Surprise," as Udon unlocked the scroll to reveal a coat. Moegi then picked it up and handed it to him, and Udon packed it away. When Naruto realized it was his father's coat, he noticed that the 6th.1 was now printed on the back instead of the 4th, and that a large red shuriken was patterned just above it where a person's shoulder blades would protrude. This clearly represented his new moniker, Fox Shuriken. He looked down at it after putting it on. It was a perfect fit. "I've had it for years and I heard when we came back you were Hokage. I wanted to give you a present to congratulate you so I found it in my attic." I asked Moegi and Hanabi to stitch the patterns on and Udon packed it into the scroll. Konohamaru looked down at his feet and sheepishly added, "But if you don't want it it's," as he explained, looking at Naruto to see if his friend liked it. Their new Hokage interrupted him by embracing him and his companions like bears. He crushed their wind and said, "Thanks guys, I appreciate it." When he realized this, he relaxed. "So Hanabi I knew you liked her," the blonde said as the genin passed out from low oxygen. "Boss," blushed as Konohamaru protested after recovering first. As Suigetsu, a purple-eyed, shark-faced man, attempted to stab Guy in the stomach, Konohamaru jumped in front of Guy. With blood streaming from the wound, the Leaf's green beast of battle watched as Konohamaru took the blow intended for him. Guy was appalled when he heard Naruto and Guy yelling together, "No Konohamaru," over the roar of combat. "I know you promised Naruto to protect me," Konohamaru said meekly as his life came to an abrupt end. He coughed out blood as he struggled to continue, but you're stronger than me. You can beat this guy and his blue-skinned walking sushi of a partner. He grinned at him and added, I'll send your love to your students when I meet them. Suigetsu threw Konohamaru off his sword because he was now bored. With his wind sword ready, Naruto charged forward. The sound of battle drowned out the sound ninja's cries of agony and horror as the blonde charged them and ripped them to pieces. Naruto continued to run after the final ninja fell into his hands, just managing to grab Konohamaru before he hit the ground. Bye boss. It's a pity. I'll never take your hat from you, like I promised, Konohamaru said with a smile and a mumble. He coughed up more blood, and as he struggled to keep his eyes open, his last words came out. I coming grandpa. Udon. His eyes flickered, Moegi. Before closing them and grinning and whispering, Hanabi, before he stopped breathing. Naruto awoke with a start, his face dripping with tears and perspiration. His breathing was labored. No, that won't happen, that was just a bad dream of a bad memory, he told himself as he wiped his face. He noticed the sun when he looked up at the sky. It was midday, based on its position in the sky. And it was midday when the picture was taken. A furious Naruto roared in, damn, I'm late. Knowing it would miss it, Naruto leapt to his feet and started running. A throb responded, oh well, at least the burn is gone. Or maybe not, he sighed, hoping that his tardiness would not significantly alter the schedule. Naruto was seated on a chair directly in front of the desk in the Hokage's office. The blonde tried to hide her feelings as she gazed at the third. When Naruto saw Iruka, he struggled to control his emotions because he was staring at the man who had supported him during his childhood and who had given his life to protect the village from the snake blitz. The third looked up at the blonde from his paperwork and sighed, Naruto, why were you late for the photo shoot? The blonde said, I apologize, old man. I dozed off during training. The third looked at Naruto worriedly and sighed, well, don't be late tomorrow. Besides, that's not why I asked you to come here. I wanted to talk to you about Mizuki. A sigh went through the blonde's mind. Damn, should have known this would come up, with, I'm the fourth's son, and, I'm not really an idiot. I was able to divert Iruka to some extent. After pretending to appear a little uneasy, Naruto said, I'm fine, old man, don't worry about me. Are you sure? The Hokage asked, you don't seem your usual self. The third waited for the customary, believe it, cry, but it never materialized. Naruto nodded. Yes, I feel fine. I was at the time really torn up, hell I was. But then I remembered Iruka's lecture about how in the shinobi career we would end up killing and that it would be something that you would never get used to and told us ways that might help get over it. So I decided to do the basic thing, think about what would have happened if you didn't do it. So I figured if I hadn't killed him he would have killed me and Iruka-sensei and... A startled Hokage was staring at Naruto when he paused. Okay. Firstly, when did you ever pay attention to Iruka? Secondly, why have you not said all your usual sayings? Asked Naruto, looking perplexed. You know, like believe it or datbeo. I can't remember the last time I did that, but Naruto bit his lip. However, I will never again say those things. Well, since I'm a ninja now I have to stop saying childish things like that, and truth be told, I really hated saying those things. Naruto sighed. Iruka did tell you that the whole idiot thing was fake, right? Yes, he did, but I really didn't believe it, said Sarutobi, looking surprised. But now I do. Naruto snarled angrily. I'm sorry for doubting you, but... The elderly man said quickly. Pretending to be angry, Naruto stood up, but to the third, he appeared truly enraged, thinking as he did so. He was unable to make a significant personality change, so... Naruto put his hands together and said, okay, old man, you're asking for it. Fearfully, the old man thought, oh no, not the sexy jutsu. However, he was taken aback when the blonde performed some hand seals rather than changing, and then pointed to the Hokage while yelling genjutsu. Pervert's dream. And I won't describe what the old man is seeing because I'm not perverted. Mental note. This jutsu shows the victim the images of. I'll let you imagine that. The third was lying flat on the ground with blood oozing from his nose and eyes following the performance. Cough cough porno show cough cough. It took him 5 minutes to get off the ground, and 10 more minutes to clean his face of the blood. His snarl, never do that again, was so powerful that Naruto had to stop himself from urinating his pants as he finished. Yes Hokage. Sama, broke the blonde's speech. Old man I chal was yelled as the door opened, and Konohamaru, dressed normally, charged in. He stumbled on his scarf and fell face first at Naruto's feet. "Honorable grandson, are you hurt?" Ebisu hurried in at that moment, his voice loud and arrogant. "You tripped me up, didn't you?" yelled the aforementioned grandson as he got to his feet and pointed at Naruto. The blonde called out, "You tripped up on your own feet, Gaki." Ngaki means brat. Then she grabbed him by the scruff of his neck. Naruto recalled how much of a brat the boy was before he taught him, despite the fact that it was wonderful to see Konohamaru. Ebisu shouted in a high-pitched, obnoxious voice, "Take your hands off him. He is the honorable grandson of the third." Naruto yelled, "I don't care if he's the grandson of Kami," before slamming Konohamaru's head into the floor. This was the only way to get the child to follow Naruto, even though he didn't want to harm him. "Sorry, old man, but he had it coming to him," he said, turning away from Ebisu, who was staring and appeared scandalized. He then proceeded to the door, passing Ebisu, who was still staring like a fool, but not before saying, "Oh, and yes, I took the exercise and the kunai. Goodbye, old man." The third pondered his meaning until it finally occurred to him, and he struck his forehead in thought. "That was the other reason I called him here, of course." Ignoring Ebisu's tirade at his nephew, the professor then knelt down beneath his desk and opened the hidden compartment. The box, the letters, and the 3-pronged kunai were all gone when he looked inside. His white, harried pupil's books and research were all that remained of the third. He did, in fact, take them. "Does he know about my collection?" he thought. The cry of Ebisu, "Where's the honorable grandson?" shattered his reverie. The third said, maybe he went after Naruto, after returning the compartment to its correct location and turning to face Ebisu. The Junin cried out, "What? This is a disaster, honorable grandson," and hurried out the door. The old man reasoned that, at least he's gone, because Naruto wouldn't teach Konohamaru something really bad, would he? His forehead began to perspire as a horrifying thought crossed his mind. No, don't teach him the pervert's dream, please. Anything at all. Anything but that, Kami. As he had done so many years before, Naruto pivoted on his heels. Technically, he was doing it for the first time, but for him, it was years ago. And shouted, "I know you're following me, so give it up. That's so obvious it's pathetic." With his hands and hair sticking out from the top, Konohamaru lowered the camouflage, if you were allowed to call it that. He laughed, "Saw through my disguise, The rumors about you are true, you're good." Then he scurried over to Naruto, dropping the camouflage. "You're my new teacher and I'm your student," he shouted as he stood up and pointed at him. "Oh really? What makes you so sure I want you as my student?" raised Naruto's eyebrow. "I don't want to make it too easy for him this time. I think I made it clear in the office I don't care who your relatives are, or do I have to smack more sense into you?" Konohamaru sulked and pleaded, "Come on please. I mean I am the Hokage's gra." Naruto spoke directly to him. Konohamaru continued, "That's the reason why I want you to train me. You don't see me like that. You don't see me as the honorable grandson of the third Hokage." Naruto then reached for his hand and said, "Hold on, I can guess the next bit. The other reason is that you think I'm so good that you think that my training will help you become Hokage faster. Am I doing good so far?" "Yeah, that's right, so can you, Page." Konohamaru nodded, but Naruto raised his hand for silence once more. "Listen, Konoha wasn't built in a day, and the third didn't become Hokage overnight. He became Hokage because he put in his best effort and understood what true strength is." "Do you know what true strength is?" Naruto said. Konohamaru nodded and said, "Yeah, it comes from learning Super Cool J." However, Naruto raised his hand once more, and there was silence. "Well, this is new," Konohamaru said. "He never did anything similar to the last time." "Wrong. Jutsu helps, but that's not true strength. True strength comes from the will to protect your friends by doing anything, even if it costs you your life." "Hey, isn't that the will of fire junk that Grandpa preaches?" Konohamaru scowled. Naruto turned away from the Gaki and started to leave, saying in a lethal tone, "It's not junk. The old man is right and I am beginning to wonder why I even considered teaching you." A tick appeared on his brow. "Wait. 3, 2, 1. Konohamaru apologized. "I'm sorry I called the will of fire junk. I just never understood how that is true strength. Please could you reconsider?" Naruto paused to listen. Unbeknownst to Konohamaru, a smile appeared on his face. "That's a beginning, but I need more evidence to determine whether he is still as committed as he was at that time." He pondered for a moment before an idea came to him. "I already changed the timeline, so I need to be cautious of changes." Konohamaru whooped, "Thanks boss, you won't be." But Naruto held up his hand, and the young boy fell silent. He turned around and said, "Okay, I'll train you. If you can complete this challenge. Now remember this, you can quit anytime you want because this challenge might prove too much for you. Are you prepared?" With an enthusiastic nod, Konohamaru said, "I'm ready, what's the challenge?" From where they stood, the street was silent. Konohamaru was waiting for the challenge when it pressed in around him. The silence was broken by Naruto after the moment had dragged on longer. "Walk with me." His jaw dropped. "What? I thought it would be something cool and difficult. What was all the suspense for?" With a calm smile, Naruto remarked, "Just a habit of mine." Konohamaru muttered, "An annoying one." Naruto turned on his heels and started to walk down the street, saying, "But all jokes aside." A stern expression covered his face as he said, "You must try to follow me. I'll even make it easy for you by just sticking to a walking pace." "Well, you coming or what?" he shouted as he glanced over his shoulder at Konohamaru, who was merely standing there. "This will be easy," he boasted as Konohamaru ran after him and stood by his side. The blonde thought, "We'll see about that." Konohamaru started to walk after him. After that, Naruto turned to face a wall and carried on moving. Boss? What are you?" Konohamaru asked in confusion, but he stopped when he saw his question ascend the wall. He looked down at Konohamaru halfway up the wall and said, "I said follow me, not stand around and gawp." He then proceeded to walk up the wall until he reached the roof. When he walked down the opposite wall onto the next street after crossing the roof, he was startled to see a panting Konohamaru who seemed to have run the entire length of the building to ward him off. "Huh? Boss?" he gasped. "I told you this would be." But he stopped when he saw his boss ascend a second building, larger than the first in both diameter and height. Oh come on. This pattern persisted for a considerable amount of time, with Naruto climbing and descending buildings and Konohamaru attempting to keep up with him but barely succeeding. This continued for about an hour before Naruto concluded Konohamaru had done enough. In order to teach the same boy chakra control, he went to the training ground where he had previously taught him sexy jutsu. He heard his pursuer's labored breathing as he stumbled after him as the training ground came into view. As Konohamaru fell to the ground, exhausted from all the running, Naruto halted in the middle of the training area. "Damn, I didn't think it would take so much out of me," Naruto said, shaking his head. "The shadow clone I sent to get ramen should return soon, hopefully." The shadow clone appeared in the clearing with 2 smoking bowls of ramen, seemingly at the exact moment. It approached Naruto, handed him 1 bowl, and was ready to consume the contents of the other when he struck it in the head, giving him a headache. Before it hit the floor, he grabbed the other bowl of ramen and set it next to Konohamaru, saying, "Eat up. You need some energy if you want to train." Konohamaru sat up and started eating the bowl of ramen without using a chopstick or any manners, as if those were the magic words. Naruto thought, even I didn't just glug it down. Then, using the included chopsticks, Naruto began eating his own ramen. He ate the ramen slowly, enjoying the flavor. He hadn't had ramen for what seemed like years, which may be the case given that it had been 6 years. He finished his bowl and put it down, but when he got up, he saw an animated Konohamaru who appeared eager and impatient. "All right, let's get started," he said. He motioned for Kono, I'm tired of typing his entire name, so I'm just calling him Kono, to accompany him to a group of trees at the training ground's edge. When they got to the bottom of the tree, Naruto stated, "Now I'm going to teach you how to control your chakra. I guess you know what it is, right?" Kono gave a firm nod. "Good. Saves me from explaining it to you. Now chakra control can help you in many ways. It can help you stick to surfaces, like what I did when you were following me. It can also help with your jutsu and..." Naruto continued by outlining every advantage of chakra control. The blonde walked away and sat down facing the tree after he finished, giving Kono a kunai and giving him instructions. "Now I want you to focus chakra into your feet, then run up the tree. When you reach a point when you can't continue, mark the spot as you fall down. This will help mark your progress." Kono remained motionless, awaiting Naruto's order to proceed. Naruto said, "Well," and pointed to the tree, saying, "Get climbing." Kono nodded, turned to face the tree, and charge. When he got to the trunk, he began to run up its bark, but he quickly fell off. Clutching his head, which had struck the ground first, he fell to his back in a heap on the ground. With a sigh, Naruto got to his feet, and he thought, well, either he has too little chakra reserves or he has big reserves but little control. This will take a long time if it's the latter, but if it's the former, I could always assist him with his taijutsu, though. Next time be calm and concentrate. Naruto approached the brat, who was still writhing in agony and clutching his head, and took one of Konohamaru's arms, pulling him to his feet while stating, "If you're not, then all you'll do is slip off." Kono rubbed his aching head and said, "Okay boss, I'll nail it next time for sure." Then, with renewed vigor, he ran at the tree once more. When he got to the trunk, he began running up the bark once more, staying there for at least 5 seconds before falling off. But this time, Naruto managed to grab Kono before his head struck the ground once more. He placed him on the ground and said, "Not bad." Kono smiled, "But not good either. Before I say you have mastered this exercise, you need to at least reach the lowest branch." Konohamaru's smile disappeared, and he moaned, "Aw man, why is training so hard?" Naruto looked at him and replied, "Like I said, Konoha wasn't built in a day and..." However, Kono interrupted him. Yeah, and the old man didn't become strong in one night, but still why'd I have to train so hard? You've had me running around all the time and trying to pull off this exercise all in one day. I mean, the academy doesn't train people this hard, so... Geez, this is definitely helpful. I can get him to shut up whenever I want to. Naruto then raised his hand once more, and Kono fell silent. "Am I teaching you something at the academy?" he asked, to which Kono shook his head. "No, I'm not. I'm teaching you something that is expected from genin, not from academy students. In the academy they only prepare you to be ninja, they don't force you to train as hard like genin do. I'm not a genin either, but I want to be strong, so I put effort in and train as much as I possibly can to make sure I can achieve my dream." With interest in his voice, Kono inquired, "And what is your dream, boss?" For some reason, Naruto was unable to lie when he was about to say, to become Hokage. Since he had already accomplished his goal of becoming Hokage, Naruto had recently lost interest in it. Is it his future? Oh, how incredibly annoying. I believe I was around Shika and his father too much. The young child impatiently awaited his boss's response before asking, "So, what is it, boss?" Naruto chose to be honest, saying, "It's not that big of a deal anyway. It's not as though I haven't already altered the timeline." The orange-haired Soul Reaper was lying on the ground beneath the Hollow's claw in another dimension, just as it was about to kill it, when it suddenly started to sneeze. Taking advantage of this, the Soul Reaper struck the Hollow's mask with his Zanpakuto, causing it to shatter in two. The Hollow swore, "Aw crap," as the underworld's gates opened behind him. "And I thought it was bad being killed by that demon," he continued, but was impaled by a hand holding a spike that had come out of the gate. The Ginger Soul Reaper saw the Hollow, who had been known as Mizuki in life, for the very last time as the hand retreated into the gate. In an attempt to avoid giving away too much of the truth, Naruto started, "Well, there was this man who had saved me from a terrible thing that would have happened if he had not intervened." Naruto paused, searching for additional words. "How did he save you, boss?" Kono asked him as he was thinking. "Well, let's just say he gave me a chance, and no, I won't explain what that means. Anyway, the point is because of what he did, I promised him I would fulfill his dream for him." "But why did you say you would fulfill it for him? And what was his dream?" Kono asked with a frown after nodding in comprehension. Naruto exclaimed, "Well, never mind. Just continue the exercise, Gaki. You need to reach the lower branch before I say you master this exercise." The child growled, "Don't call me a Gaki. You're not that old enough to call me one. You're only what, 12? And a tick appeared on his forehead. "I'm actually 20, the blonde thought. Kono stomped his feet and said, "I am not," he shrugged. "So? I'm still older than you and all you're doing at the moment is moaning like a spoilt kid." "Wait, you are?" The blonde, grinning, pointed to the tree and said, "Then prove it. If you can finish this exercise in a week, I will stop calling you a Gaki. For a while." Kono positioned himself in front of the tree and yelled, "Believe it," with a determined smile on his face. "Watch me, boss. I'll finish this exercise so fast that even you'll be amazed," he boasted. Naruto perspired. "Did I actually say that before? It makes sense why they called me a baka." He thought of his white, harried, and perverted sensei. But at least he has guts. And guts to never give up is a true form of strength, isn't it, pervy sage? He smiled as he remembered his old sensei, watching Kono run up the tree again and then fall down. Naruto was certain that he heard someone being severely beaten after hearing a faint scream. As the student of 3 rewound perverts, it turned out that Baki had the entire collection of Icha Icha, Desert Love, and Killer Bee read extremely obscene raps. He was familiar with the sound of a peeping Tom being handed to him by a group of irate, agitated, and extremely dangerous women. He wondered where the old pervert had gone. The explanation was that he was lying face down on a pavement in Konoha after being nearly killed, tortured, and disfigured by two women who had discovered him conducting research. Normally, they would have just screamed and thrown objects at him, but sadly for the great sage, Sume, Kurenai, and Anko had been in the bath today, and if he remembered correctly. No, he couldn't recall the first name, but he knew it was a Haruno because of the pink hair, loud yelling, and brute strength that were strikingly similar to Tsunade's. He cursed Konoha's plants as he forced himself to stand up, since his sneezes must have been caused by hay fever. What if it wasn't, though? What if someone was to blame? When he heard snakes slithering across the ground, he stopped thinking. He looked up to see that Anko and her other bath companions had changed back into their appropriate clothes and were carrying brooms, claws, kunai, and, in Anko's case, snakes. He screamed throughout the fire country as she said, "Striking shadow snakes. Break the family jewels." Her snakes were now dangerously close to the sage's mid-regions, and she smiled evilly as she said, "Well, you didn't think we would let you get off so easy, did you? Wherever he is, it sounds like he's gone and perved on Kunoichi and got caught," Naruto thought as his perspiration dropped. "Though it would be a pleasant contrast to having your student kill you. I hope he doesn't die. Before you pass away, you get to witness a sight worth seeing." As he worked to become proficient in the exercise, Kono truly meant what he said. 5 hours later, the child was lying on the lower branch, panting heavily. "See, pant. I told. Pant. You. Pant. Would. Pant. Do I?" He panted as he looked down at his teacher and gave him the thumbs up. However, the child, who was so exhausted that he fell asleep with his head lolling on his shoulder. "He wasn't so bad," Naruto said, shaking his head. "The tree is only 3 feet tall, but it's a good beginning. Where's the honorable grandson?" Sounded loudly below, interrupting his thoughts. "I'll teach him something when he..." As he turned to face Ebisu, who was glaring at Naruto with a stony coldness and a pitiful intent to kill. Naruto's ears were ringing from the man's shout. Naruto shouted at the closet pervert, "Geez. You scream like a frickin' Haruno. Could it kill you to speak like a normal person, you four-eyed freak?" After he could hear himself pondering. "Honorable grandson, please come with me and leave this delinquent to his own devices," Ebisu said, ignoring him, to the clearing. "Honorable grandson, please come with me and leave this delinquent to his own devices. I am your shortcut to becoming Hokage, not this pitiful punk." Kono snored loudly in response, still sitting on the branch with his head lolling over his shoulder. How could he have slept through all of that shouting? I reasoned that Naruto must be extremely tired, maybe I had overworked him. He then looked at Ebisu, who was frantically searching for Kono. "Meh, no pain no gain. Listen, Four Eyes. All that stuff about being a shortcut is a pile of bull. There are no shortcuts to becoming Hokage. All there is to it is hard work and dedication. Anyway, if you're such a great teacher, why did he seek me out? Looks to me that I, the delinquent, am a far better teacher than you are. What are you, a held-back genin or something? You insolent Gaki. I will show you who's a held-back genin," Ebisu roared, growling, and prepared himself for battle, saying, "Get ready to feel the power of a Junin." "Oh yeah? Well, witness the power of my secret killer move," was Naruto's cliched response, as he raised his hands in front of his chest, ready to make hand signals. When he reached the final hand sign, he pointed to Ebisu with his left hand and mentally yelled, "Icha Icha style. Hentai paradise." He began going through the hand signs, thinking, "I went easy on the old man with this, but you Four Eyes are getting the full version." When the most erotic scene he had ever seen flashed before his eyes, Ebisu froze, his face rigged. 3, 2, 1, he screamed, and blood poured out of his nose in 2 thick rivers of red that shot out like a fire hose at high speed. The strength of Ebisu's nosebleed alone was enough to lift him into the air. He was lifted into the air and disappeared from view. Naruto heard the sound of fists hitting flesh, a scream, and a faint splash. Sweat trickled down the blonde's brow as he thought, "I think I overdid it a bit." It was obvious that the closet pervert had found his way into the women's bathhouse. Jiraiya was now beside Ebisu, with his head deeply embedded in the pavement. His warning came too late, as he heard the sound of snakes once more. Jiraiya pulled him back down as he attempted to push himself off the ground, whispering, "Don't move. If you move, then they will beat you up like a piñata." As Ebisu turned to face the group of irate women, he moaned and prepared himself for the pain. The screams of pure agony and suffering reverberated throughout the elemental lands and will be remembered until the end of time. "Well, looks like you're still alive," said Anko, wearing a very sadistic grin. "Well, at least you've got a friend to suffer with you." The snakes continued to approach. Jiraiya closed his eyes in fear and Ebisu whimpered, "Mommy." After a moment of silence, Naruto made the cross symbol on his chest and prayed, "May Kami have mercy on your soul Ebisu, for you have suffered a fate worse than death." Perverts in other nations were using the same words, with the exception of his name. A.N. Well, that's strange. There must be some sort of sacred pervert thing. He noticed that Kono was still sound asleep when he looked up at the tree. I really put him through the ringer. Well, better not wake him. Naruto jumped up onto the branch and gathered Kono in his arms. Better drop him off at the old man's office. He then jumped down from the tree and made his way directly to his destination. Naruto knocked on the door of the Hokage building, set the sleeping Kono down gently, and turned to leave, but not before grinning and saying, "You did well, Konohamaru. Hopefully with my help and your dedication you will become Hokage someday." After all, Naruto turned away from the sleeping boy, who was obviously having a dream about ramen because he was muttering about noodles and miso, and thought, "I had my turn, so it's only right to pass it on to my rival." After the door opened and an Anbu guard saw the sleeping boy on the doorstep, he turned to see who had knocked and mumbled, "There you are, your grandfather worried about you." The boy snored in response to his question, "Whoa, what happened to you?" The Anbu shook his head and muttered, "Well, whatever you did, you look like me after sensei first trained me." He shuddered, recalling that his first day of Chunin training had not been the most enjoyable. "Hokage. Sama, I found. Hokage. Sama," the Anbu said as he carried the sleeping boy upstairs to the Hokage's office, kicking the door open because his hands were full. The aforementioned Hokage was sitting at his desk with his crystal ball on top of it. Hiruzen Sarutobi had been watching Naruto and Kono throw his crystal ball, and it would be an understatement to say that he was shocked that the blonde had such wisdom for his age and that Naruto truly understood the tree climbing exercise. He had never realized that the boy held his clan's belief, the will of fire, in such high regard. Even though the old man was happy that the boy was so wise and knowledgeable, he was saddened by the fact that he had never truly known the real Naruto despite having known him for so long. That silly smile and catchphrase, "Believe it, were all a ruse," as was the boy's loud boasting about how he would become Hokage. He pondered why Naruto pretended to be such a fool while he was training Kono. He then recalled what Iruka had told him, which was that when he tried to be smart, people ignored him, so he pretended to be foolish to attract attention from others. When Hiruzen witnessed Naruto testing his grandson, his only thought was, harsh. Harsh Naruto was clever, but his test had really pushed Kono. Since the academy had never pushed kids this hard, it would have been exhausting for them to chase him around half of Konoha. Despite the fact that it was exhausting, Kono persevered, and as a result, Naruto taught him how to climb trees. However, despite his instruction, Naruto showed no mercy by pushing Kono harder, which caused the boy to complain that the academy had never pushed them this hard. After that, Naruto gave him a lecture about how he expected Kono to train harder because this wasn't the academy and that he worked hard to fulfill his dream despite not being a genin. When Kono asked Naruto what his dream was, the old man was expecting him to respond, to become Hokage. He was astonished to learn that Naruto's dream was to fulfill another dream, one that seemed to have saved him by offering him a chance, rather than to become Hokage. The boy ended the conversation by telling his grandson to keep exercising and referring to him as a gaki as he did so, but it was never made clear who this individual was or what he meant by chance. Given that Naruto was only roughly 3 years older than him, and apparently so was his grandson, Sarutobi questioned why he had given Kono that name. If he completed the exercise within a week, Naruto replied, he would no longer call him that. Kono jumped right in, saying he would finish it quickly and even believe it. As promised, Kono spent hours practicing the exercise until he became proficient. Even though the aforementioned student had dozed off on the branch, this was a significant accomplishment for an academy student. Since Sarutobi had seen the boy's accomplishment firsthand, he could see that Naruto was impressed with him. The elderly man, who had feared using his pervert's dream jutsu, was relieved that Naruto had taught him how to do it. It had been so graphic, the genjutsu. He trembled. Although he had to acknowledge that the boy who had invented the sexy jutsu was the source of the idea, Naruto was unable to explain how he came up with or even came up with the concept for this jutsu. Following the boy's criticism of the Junin's strength and his designation as a held-back genin, Ebisu challenged Naruto. Naruto used the same jutsu on him, and the results were terrible. The old man was reduced to staring at the crystal ball because he was paralyzed by fear of what he had witnessed. The only thing that made him stop staring was when his Anbu guard, who was holding his sleeping grandson, spoke to him. "What?" the third asked blankly as he glanced up at the Anbu. "I found your grandson Hokage. Sama." Someone left him by the front door, the Anbu said, pointing to the sleeping boy. The third grinned and gave Naruto a mental thank you for both delivering his grandson and teaching him the lessons he had learned today. After a brief pause, Sarutobi said, "Okay, take him to his room. And when that's done, bring me the Forbidden Scroll," he asked. "As you wish, Hokage. Sama, but what do you want with the Forbidden Scroll, if you don't mind me asking?" the Anbu said, frowning behind his mask. The Anbu gasped in surprise and questioned, "What is this jutsu, Hokage?" "Sama," the third responded, "I need to add a new jutsu to it. A jutsu so powerful and dangerous it could even defeat me in one blow." While the Anbu appeared perplexed, Sarutobi bowed his head and muttered in a dark tone, "Pervert's dream." He then made the mark of the cross on his chest and recited, "May Kami have mercy upon your soul because you have suffered a fate worse than death." He paused as he gazed out the window at Naruto's apartment, then went on, "And may Kami favor Konoha in the heavens, because I believe once Naruto becomes a genin, the shit will hit the fan, or at least that's what the younger generation says these days." Naruto inhaled deeply and peacefully. In addition to straightening his hair and removing any trace dust from his jumpsuit, which he intended to change, he fiddled with his goggles on his forehead. Despite facing multiple members of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist, defeating a giant sand demon, facing a Rinnegan wielder, and killing the foolish duckbutt, Naruto still finds it impossible to confront his former girlfriend or fiancé. "Oh, this is so confusing. She hasn't been my girlfriend yet, and I haven't either." As you might have guessed, Naruto was apprehensive as he stood at the Hyuga compound's front gate. After working out in the morning, Naruto took a shower to eliminate the odor and brushed the dust and grime from his jumpsuit. After taking a step in the direction of the gate, Naruto retreated 3 steps. His attempts to see Hinata were thwarted by his shyness, which he cursed because he believed he would never be it. Naruto approached the wall of the compound with a sigh. He slid down it, sitting, thinking about his situation. Why did he hesitate so much? The love of his life, or previous life, was beyond these gates, and he was behaving like her from their childhood. Was it just that he didn't want to see her? Or was he stopped cold by the sight of her mangled and bleeding body? Or was it the recollection of that pivotal instant prior to the commencement of combat? "Come on, Naruto-kun. You promised to take me to that new Chinese restaurant," exclaimed Hinata, sporting an Anbu cat mask and her Anbu outfit. The 6th Hokage, Naruto, was seated at his desk. With the assistance of his shadow clones, he had completed his daily paperwork and was essentially idle. Nevertheless, Naruto refused to leave his desk. The reason was that, despite Sakura's reports that they weren't at the perimeter, Sasuke's army could attack them at any time. Even though it didn't seem likely, he wanted to be in a position where he could organize his fellows in the event that they struck. He and Shikamaru had been determined to put that bastard's head on a pike ever since Gaara and his siblings arrived following the attack on the sand. In particular, Shikamaru had grown more aloof and intent on the war effort, yelling at his teammates to put in more training and devoting endless hours to battle plans. Nevertheless, he continued to pay Temari a visit at the hospital. Temari, whom Naruto knew, was a strong, self-reliant woman who always prevailed, even under the most trying conditions. She was a shadow of the person she used to be, a shivering wreck. In her own arms, she had watched that monster kill her son. The shock and pain had taken their toll. Gaara had also changed. He had become completely alone since Matsuri's passing. He never talked to anyone unless it was absolutely necessary, and even then, he would either nod, shake his head, or point in response to any significant question. Whether significant or not, Kankuro remained silent. Standing in front of him was the only bright light in the tense village atmosphere. "Look, Hinata, I can't leave the office for anything at the moment. Shikamaru wants to discuss another battle strategy with." Naruto sighed as he explained, for the 100th time. A pouty Hinata interrupted, saying, "But you can use a shadow clone to meet with him. Please, this might be the only time we have left." The underlying plea in her tone was audible to Naruto. Despite her forced smile, Naruto could see that she was frightened too. Of the team sent to find Kabuto, she was the only Konoha survivor. He and a certain duckbutt had been located by Team 8. As he and Kabuto decimated Hinata's team, Sasuke had shown no mercy. The first to fall, Kiba gave his life to defend Akamaru from Sasuke's Chidori sword. Without Shino, Hinata would have died there. He protected her from Sasuke's aimed fireball with the last of his bugs. In front of a wounded Hinata, the aforementioned Uchiha had become annoyed, and had slowly strangled Shino to death. Hinata was so furious that she tore Kabuto to pieces while she was dying. Had it not been for Sai's last last-minute rescue, Sasuke would have also taken her life. After Sai brought her back from the fight, Naruto recalled how deeply dejected and hurt her face was. He even recalled the sounds of Akamaru wailing as Sai had all but dragged the devoted dog from the body of its deceased master. Now, exhausted from the battle but not yet weak enough to pass away, the dog spends his days on Kiba's grave. With the intention of joining his master in the next life, he sits there day and night. She was now the only thing preventing Konoha from sinking into a deep depression, even with her mask on. Naruto gave in as a result. He rose, calling forth a clone, and started walking toward Hinata's side. He extended his hand to her, and the shadow clone assumed the original's posture. She accepted it as she removed her mask with her other hand. Then they leaned forward together until their mouths touched. After a gentle beginning, Hinata intensified their kiss, her tongue now probing Naruto's mouth. The Hokage retaliated, starting the struggle for supremacy with his tongue. During the dance, their free left hands started to explore each other's bodies. One stoked a slender frame, while the other massaged the other's abs white. As Naruto's hands moved higher and higher, Hinata started to groan softly into the kiss. They parted ways, both of them glaring at the shadow clone that had been idly spinning a kunai on its middle finger. Get a room. Naruto found that to be one of the most disheartening things. His clones were somber and solemn, with sporadic bursts of dry humor. Hinata glared and blushed a little at the remark, but she quickly collected herself. Well, my Hokage. Sama. I take that as a yes, she said slyly as she turned to face the real Naruto. In response, he smiled broadly, something he hadn't done in a while. After putting an arm around her shoulder, he said to his clone, "Hey, can you get the shuriken down there? I don't want to disturb the guards." With a sigh, the clone complied with the original's instructions. He took a 3-edged shuriken with a seal affixed to its inner circle out of his equipment pouch. This Flying Thunder God shuriken had the same function as the kunai version. Then, slowly, the clone tossed the artillery out the window. Naruto took Hinata's hand as it flew through the air and admonished, "Brace yourself." Not a second too soon, she did so. Hinata, who was seconded later, felt as though she was being forced through a tiny opening. Although this feeling was fleeting, it left her stunned. "You okay, Sunshine?" "Chan? I almost puked the first time I did that," Naruto asked, looking at her with concern on his face, and Hinata nodded to indicate that she was all right. As soon as they were ready, they left for the restaurant hand in hand along the main street of the village, which ran down to the main gate in the office. As they brought down each step, their footsteps reverberated as they moved in silence. The streets were typically deserted because the kids were either studying at the academy. The civilians had moved their wares inside to sell because they were afraid of an invasion that could destroy them at any time, or nearly all of the ninjas were on guard duty or on a mission. The emptiness of his village, which resulted from the news of the other hidden villages' collapse, saddened Naruto. Since laughter could no longer be heard from the taverns, restaurants, or playgrounds, the situation's reality had cast a gloomy cloud over Konoha, destroying the pleasures of both young and old. Walking next to him was the only bright light that remained among the fading leaves. Additionally, she was currently fumbling with her shirt while her cheeks were glowing crimson, a sign of shyness she had not displayed in 4 years. "Are you all right, Sunshine-chan?" Naruto asked Hinata in a worried tone as he halted just as they were approaching the new eatery at the very end of the line of buildings that lined the main street. With her hands still clasped around her boyfriend's, Hinata blushed even more as she answered quietly, "I'm all right, Naruto-kun. It's just..." She inhaled deeply, and her embarrassed expression gave way to one of seriousness. "You know that I'm going to be the clan leader after my father dies, right?" she said calmly. Naruto gave a nod. How was he unaware of that? Her father, Hisashi, had declared in public following the mission involving Kabuto that Hinata was indeed his daughter, a proud Hyuga, and a skilled ninja. Her status as the clan heir was restored. Hinata was ecstatic about her father's public recognition of her, which gave her even more confidence than him dating her. She had always felt that her father had considered her a weak and pitiful ninja. Fortunately, Hisashi said that branding her would be useless during this conflict, so Hanabi's attitude toward Hinata had significantly improved. As a result, Hanabi would not be branded with the birdcage seal. With a handsome ninja for a boyfriend and a supportive family, Hinata had everything she had ever desired. Still speaking calmly, she went on, "Well, when that happens, I'll be too busy to see you, except when the council meetings are held, and I'll be expected to have children, to sustain the main branch, and also..." She paused, taking a deep, soothing breath before continuing, "Also, we don't know when Sasuke will strike, which day will be our last, so..." Naruto listened carefully as a vague notion of her request began to take shape in his mind. As her will started to weaken, the lavender-eyed heiress chuckled a little before responding. Hey, Ino said that I should wait for you to ask, being the man and all that. But I know that you have a heavy burden to carry and need to focus on the village safety. So I decided to ask you instead. Then, while looking into Naruto's sky blue eyes, Hinata took his other hand and started to gently squeeze it. As Hinata paused, it felt as though time had stopped and the moment would never end. As though the words she needed were lost in her lover's eyes, she kept gazing into the ocean of blue. Naruto Uzumaki, hero of Konoha and 6th Hokage. Will you marry me? She asked in a nervous but clear voice after what seemed like an eternity. At last, Naruto's heart landed on cloud 9 after starting to soar out of his chest and into the sky. His mind was racing with a flurry of mixed emotions, including joy, happiness, excitement, and bliss, which were drowning out reason, fear, and misery. He would have said this was a dream if their hands hadn't been clasped together. Nevertheless, he could tell that this was not a dream enhanced by alcohol, by the warmth of her hands, the pleasant scent of her hair, and the fondness of her eyes. The answer, the only answer, came to Naruto's lips as he regained the voice that had, at the time, seemed to have left with his heart. But then he was taken by his memories. As he settled into the chair, Naruto's clone thought, great, the original probably wants me to do some more paperwork. He also saw that the original Naruto and his girlfriend were taking a quick nap. He sighed, took out a shadow, cloned kunai, and started spinning it around his middle finger, which was in the tiny hoop-shaped hole at the kunai's butt. Then, glancing back at the original, who was now beginning to push the kiss a bit too far, he said, in a slack tone, get a room. The couple broke out of their embrace as a result of this. They then gave the clone a dagger glare, but the clone simply ignored them and kept playing with his kunai. The clone was by herself a few minutes after assisting the lovers in leaving through the window. Well, at least there's no paperwork, he thought as he placed his feet up on the desk. Doing the paperwork is all we do these days. We are hardly used for anything else by him. Hey, Naruto, Gaki. Let us in, was said by a pair of voices after a knock was heard from the office door. Come in, you two. The door's open, the clone said, quickly putting his feet down off the desk before responding. The clone felt a little better now because it was uncommon to have his two best medics around. He felt the same way the original did for his friends, despite being a clone. Why in the world is she present? The former Hokage, now head medic, Tsunade, and his old, pink, harried teammate, Sakura, were visible as the door swung open. Both of them entered with a bottle of sake and cups. Hello, Naruto. Sama. Lady Tsunade and I wondered if you'd want a cup of wine. You must be tired by now, with all the paperwork and things, said Sakura, who was the first to speak. Naruto smiled and said, sure, why not? And Sakura, don't call me Sama. Just Naruto will do. He then looked at the elderly medic and asked, how's things at the hospital, Bachin? As Sakura set down her cups on the desk. As the sound of a cup being crushed to dust filled the room, Tsunade felt a tick on her forehead. I told you, Gaki. Don't call me Bachin. With a shrug, Naruto responded, meh, old habits die hard, Bachin. Another cup was lost in Tsunade's hands and turned to dust. Seeing the warning signs, Naruto hurriedly added, okay. It's just a joke, Tsunade. But seriously, what is happening at the hospital? To be honest, it's depressing. There haven't been any serious injuries in the past few weeks. But trying to look after Temari is a full-time job, Tsunade said, letting out a sigh as she settled into a chair that Sakura had set out for her and Tsunade to sit around the desk. As the image of Temari's distraught and broken face flashed through his mind, along with the bloody bundle she clung to while rocking back and forth on the ground, Naruto's clone bit his lip. He was transported back in time as Tsunade continued, she's getting worse and worse by the day. Refusing food, her attempts at suicide. And now she's having hallucinations. She thinks she's watching her son grow up, while all she's really doing is staring at a blank wall. She mistakes Shikamaru for her son, too. Feeling sick to his stomach, Naruto's clone held up its hand to silence Tsunade. Was his own wife mistaking Shikamaru for his deceased son? That. As Sakura filled his cup with sake, the clone's horrified thoughts were interrupted by the sound of wine being poured. The clone couldn't tell that she was smiling, but she said, now come on, let's not get into morbid talks. Today, after all, is a special day. Indeed, it is the anniversary of the day the village was transformed into a crater. Very special, indeed, isn't that Sakura, not at all morbid? As he and the other two started to sip from their cups, Naruto's clone thought. As Tsunade started downing it like it was the first time, the clone simply gazed at the transparent liquid. The surface of the alcohol seemed to reflect his memories of the previous 4 years, including the day he had created Junin, the time he stood next to Baki. His hands were bandaged from his first attempt at using the wind sword, and the time he had held hands with Hinata. As the old hag handed him his Junin jacket, Tsunade, Baki, Hinata, Gaara, and all of his ninja teammates stood next to him. Additionally, there was a boy wearing a straw hat in the background, nearly obscured by Choji's profile. He was standing next to a girl with short, blonde hair, a little freckled, and dressed in a girl's typical shirt and pants. She had a bright blue bundle in her arms. Both the girl and the boy smiled as they gazed at him. The bundle screamed as its blue skin turned to blood as their skin started to melt. The only thing left was the girl's skull, and she was still grinning. "Don't be sad, boss. You only cry when you're happy," the boy said in a twisted, upbeat voice. He then opened his mouth wide, and lightning struck, directly at Naruto's face. He let go of the terrifying daydream with a violent shake of his head. Fortunately, Sakura and Tsunade were unaware. Even more horrifying was the reason they didn't. Sakura was observing Tsunade with sadistic pleasure in her eyes. Her face was ghostly pale, her eyes were wide, and blood was dripping from her mouth. The clone of Naruto was startled. He looked down at the cup he was holding, aware of what was in it. His mind started to race with questions, but he chose to act rather than ask. Dropping the cup, he knelt beneath his desk and imitated Tsunade's gurgling noises. As Tsunade collapsed to the ground, writhing wildly as blood spurted from her mouth, Sakura's face broke into a malevolent smile. Sakura then cast a quick glance in what she thought was Naruto's direction. "You really were an idiot, Naruto. Baka. I can't believe that you became the Hokage. A real ninja wouldn't have been killed so easily," she exclaimed as she finished laughing after hearing the sounds of his apparent death. His sounds of death were soon stopped by the clone in order to prevent death, but it was more difficult to stop the anger that was coursing through his body. An anger he had not felt in a long time. That bitch. Why did she try to kill me? Why did she kill Sunday? But even though you could never, not in a chance of hell, beat my Sasuke-kun. This will make his homecoming truly special, the pink-haired harlot continued to jeer as she responded to his inquiries. Extreme surprise and extreme rage were both present in Naruto's clone. He was working on the situation on one side while yelling for the whore's blood on the other. As he developed his theory, his more composed side had won for the time being. Sakura had been providing them with false intelligence, claiming that Sasuke was nowhere near the village, and she had been on Sasuke's side for Kami knows how long. However, based on her words, it sounded as though he was nearer than anticipated and ready to attack the village. Now that the baka is taken care of, I better meet up with Mizuki at the academy. He'll be pleased to know that the useless weakling is dead. Sakura exclaimed aloud as she turned away from the presumed dead Hokage. She was stopped in her tracks by the steel that was pressed against her neck and the voice of her indented victim. "Useless am I, Sakura? Baishin. Fu.1. She asked. "Well, aren't you the one to talk? Considering that you had to rely on our trust in you to kill us. To try and kill me, your leader and former teammate, plus your own sensei." Naruto continued in the same tone, glancing back at Tsunade's body, which lay on the floor, spread, eagled and pale, and said, "She was your teacher, the one who made you strong and confident when you felt useless. And you went behind her back, took advantage of her trust in you, and repaid her with poison. You know something, Sakura? Before this, I considered you as my sister, one of the most important people in my life," he said, his tone a little higher but still cold, as he directed his glare toward the back of her head, which was so intense that it might catch fire from the furry sparks that radiated from the glare. "One of my precious people, huh? Like anyone in this village consider you to be a human being. You're just a demon," she said, laughing harshly before mockingly. After frightening the kunoichi with an even harsher laugh, Naruto responded in a voice of pure hatred, "And you're just a back stabbing, traitorous whore. Looks like Sasuke and you do have something in common." He then pressed the kunai deeper into her skin, causing a drop of blood to sliver down her collarbone, and he whispered into her ear, "Now I would gladly end your life, no, Baishin. Fu. But I think the real me would want to end your worthless life." The sound of a clone dispersing filled Sakura's ears, and her eyes grew wide. Naruto now remembered the clone's memories. The clone's shock was his own, and the clone's rage was his own. Once as high as the clouds, Naruto's happiness was now as low as the fiery mantle. His face twisted, and his hands trembled in Hinata's, either in anger or, he couldn't tell, in shock. Hinata asked in a trembling voice, "Naruto-kun?" The expression on his face gave her the answer she did not hope or anticipate. As Naruto stared at his girlfriend, he couldn't help but think of Sakura's snarling face and Tsunade's corpse. He attempted to talk to explain his strange behavior, but the next second's events stopped him. Naruto had heard a scream. No, a chorus of screams from a distance. He whirled his head to look in the direction of the screams. In her victorious monologue, Sakura stated, "I'd better meet up with Mizuki at the academy. They wouldn't dare, of course." The truth was evident, though, as Naruto heard a second scream in the distance. Now the Hokage was paralyzed by horror and illness. Mizuki, who was believed to be incarcerated, would go to such lengths, but Sakura. She had demonstrated that she would end lives for her beloved, but only to silence children. It was a bitter pill for Naruto to swallow because, like Sasuke, he felt as though he had never really known her and had instead accepted her as family, despite the flimsy bonds. Hinata, who had apparently not heard the sounds of Sakura's savage crimes, asked, "Naruto, what's wrong?" Naruto's reactions told her a story she didn't want to hear, and her face was now lined with sadness. Naruto tried to come up with a reply while staring back at her with a pained expression on his face. His emotions were in utter turmoil, but he wanted to say yes, tell her what he had just witnessed, and also comfort her. However, his thoughts shifted into the state of what he was now, Hokage, as the noises increased in volume, loud enough for Hinata to hear but not comprehend. Turning on his heel, he continued, "Tell Shikamaru that I will be there momentarily if he arrives before me, and Hinata, I need you to find Shikamaru, Kakashi, Yamato, and all the other Konoha ninjas. Tell them that Sasuke is about to invade, and that they must regroup at the main gate as planned," he said, releasing Hinata's hands. "Wait, what are you talking about?" Sakura's team reported that Sasuke was nowhere near the village. Hinata interrupted him, sounding scared and perplexed. With his back still turned and his voice hurried, Naruto interrupted, saying, "Hinata, Sakura has," but was cut off by a shout that Naruto was familiar with. The face of a man with dolphin hair and a scared nose flashed before Naruto's eyes. No, not him, anyone other than him. With a sudden sense of urgency, Naruto pivoted to Hinata and screamed, "Just go. I'll explain later," before turning back to the academy's direction and starting to run. Hinata called after him, begging him to tell him what was going on. However, as the building came into view, the sounds and thoughts of his lover were pushed from his mind by the now ostensible screams of the academy students. He landed in front of the door to the academy. "Hey Naruto, wake up." The blonde awoke with a start, having slipped into both memory and sleep, and looked up at his awakener. That lazy voice and black, pineapple-shaped hair were unmistakable. Instead of the serious, alert, and humorless glare he had after his son's death, Shikamaru was giving Naruto his old, bored look. "Not that I'm interested, but why are you sleeping here? There are better spots for a nap than against the wall of the Hyuga compound, on the ground," he added in his indifferent tone. Lying, Naruto said, "I was tired and I didn't feel like scouring the village for a better place to sleep. I thought that you who understand something like that, Shikamaru." He stood up, wiping away the dust that had blown off his clothes. With an eyebrow raised, Shikamaru said, "Scouring? I never thought you'd know such a big word as a baka. And I'd never thought you'd be able to walk, you're so lazy. I guessed that Choji carried you to school, but it seems that you have some ability in terms of walking." "As little as it may be," said Naruto, feeling irritated by this. Even though Shikamaru did not see it, he was now in complete shock. He never had a proper conversation with Naruto. Instead, he had inferred his character from his failures and boasts. However, Naruto appeared much more serious now that he was facing him. Instead of his usual hazy or cheerful expression, his face was composed, mature, and perhaps older. Why is it older? Why did that word immediately come to mind as Shikamaru's eyes fixed Naruto's face with a slightly calculating look? Because his eyes exuded age and experience no matter how hard he looked, despite the fact that Naruto was as old as he was. Asuma, the ninja he had met, was just like his father, and the fourth. "Why am I bothering, Bob?" the young genius thought, "this is just too troublesome." As he shifted the conversation, he shrugged his shoulders and said, "Whatever. Why were you sleeping there? I saw you pace around, looking at the compound gate, before you took your little nap. You looked like a nervous wreck. Why are you interested? Don't your concerns only consist of sleeping and eating?" Naruto grunted as a slight flush crept into his cheeks. A yelp of pain came from behind the compound's wall before Shikamaru could respond. Both Naruto and the slothful boy turned to face the sound, recognizing the voice's owner. As worried as Shikamaru was, Naruto was more than that. "That's Hinata. What's going on over there?" With Shikamaru at his heels, Naruto immediately set out to investigate. They both passed through the unexpectedly open gate and quickly discovered what was causing her anxiety. Naruto recognized the face of the person standing over Hinata, who was slumped on the ground, but it was smug, unlike any he had seen since losing to the Jinchuriku. As he taunted, "Get up, Hinata. Or are you going to accept your fate and stay down like you belong?" That smug face was now glaring at Hinata, who was lying on the courtyard floor with a bleeding lip and a defeated expression on her face. Hinata attempted to stand up, but she appeared to be hindered by an invisible injury that kept her from doing so. Naruto felt an all-too-familiar rage at seeing her in this state, though it was not as strong or euphoric as when the two traitors unleashed it. Despite Shikamaru's attempts to stop him, the former Hokage rushed over to Neji and yelled, "Hey, what the hell is going on here?" in a furious tone. In a scathing and heartless tone, Neji looked up and said, "This does not concern you." Hinata also looked up, and her expression was a mix of surprise and relief as she saw her crush. Her expression was dejected and hopeless, though, as she felt even more pitiful because her crush must now believe that she was a failure as well. "Doesn't concern me. You're beating up one of my classmates and calling her worthless. I think my concern is well placed, don't you agree?" was Naruto's heated but reasonable response after catching this out of the corner of his eye. When Hinata heard these words, her face flushed. "At the academy, did Naruto notice me? Does he think of me as a classmate?" Neji smirked at Naruto after examining the blonde more closely. In a callous and mocking tone, he uttered, "I recognize you. You're the dead last of her year. How charming, a loser looking out for another loser." In response, Naruto said, "And you're Neji, the rookie of last year's class. Funny, you're just like our year's rookie. You look, and sound, like a 2-inch dick." His expression was impassive. The plan to enrage the blonde backfired, and Neji gritted his teeth. Hinata was taken aback because Naruto appeared different in addition to Neji losing his temper. His normally boisterous gusto was now calm and relatively loud. His cheerful expression had vanished, and he was now looking very serious. However, his eyes, which appeared to be older, were what truly seemed out of place. However, Naruto's next statement, "Anyway, you still haven't answered my question. What the hell were you doing?" interrupted her train of thought. To which Neji replied curtly, "I was just reminding her of her destiny, that being, that she will be nothing more than a weak and useless loser." Neji glared at him with his opaque eyes. Naruto was yelling in his head, "How dare he say that about Hinata? Chan! Let's beat the living daylights out of that cocky jerk." Naruto's expression was unreadable from the outside, and his tone belied his rage as he said, "Her destiny, what a load of claptrap." Shikamaru slipped past the two conversationalists toward Hinata, who was still struggling to stand, as Neji's eyes heated. Although Shikamaru found it annoying, he had made the decision to remove Hinata from danger because he suspected that Naruto and Neji's verbal altercation would soon turn physical. Looking at the two boys, he thought, now if this does go physical, Neji will probably win. He has a bloodline and a year's worth of experience to back him up while Naruto isn't even a shinobi. He assisted Hinata to her feet. "I can make sure he doesn't get hurt, but I doubt I'll be able to prevent him from getting involved." "I mean, how do you know what her destiny is? If you had some kind of vision of the future that showed you her destiny, then you're probably touched in the head," Naruto said blankly as Shikamaru helped Hinata walk back to where Shikamaru had been. "Why should I listen to you? You're just a loser, like her, and are going to be one for the rest of your life. Such is the fate of all failures," Neji said, his face twisted in anger. He responded with a skeptical tone, "There you go again, going on about destiny and fate as if they were true. All you're saying is that people can't change. That they're doomed to be either a success or a failure for the rest of their lives, but that's not true." Naruto's eyes then started to return some fire, though not as fiercely as the Destiny Boys. Naruto's voice shifted when he began to speak, robust and authoritative tone. "The future is not set in stone, and nor does it change by sitting on your ass and waiting for it to happen. We forge our own paths, our own destinies, with the decisions we make in the trials that life brings, being either good or bad. Hinata may not be strong now, but that does not mean she is a failure now or going to be for the rest of her life." When Hinata heard her crush say these things, her face flushed. "Naruto does not believe that I am a failure. I'm very happy." Shikamaru, however, was in complete disbelief. He never in a million years imagined that Naruto, the loud-mouthed, stupid fool, could have such charisma. He always seemed like a total baka, and he's never acted like this before. Shikamaru, however, simply ignored Naruto and labeled him a troublesome idiot. He never truly knew him. But now Naruto had the assurance and authority of the fourth. It was a competitive drag, and Shikamaru's thoughts were all posing different queries. Now I don't care if you're the rookie of every class since the village was founded, I'm going to show you that not only can hard work and determination make even the weakest bud strong, but that people can change, for the better and for worse, even if I have to knock it into your thick skull. Naruto then prepared himself by raising his hands into a battle stance. After being shaken by the blonde's remarks, Neji was initially taken aback before assuming his stern demeanor. He responded angrily, as if you could. You just lose, such is your fate. In response, Naruto simply glared at Neji and said, then prove it. Let us see who is right, if you're not too much of a coward. For what felt like an eternity, the past versus the unimaginable future, cold versus resolve, opaque versus blue. Two kunai then engaged in combat in the center of their staring ground. Neji sprang forward, his Byakugan blazing fiercely as he prepared a gentle fist jab. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The blonde yelled as he landed back on the ground after jumping back and avoiding the blow by inches. 10 identical copies of the blonde were now circling the young Hyuga, and Neji put his hands up and his feet in a defensive position. Thinking they were illusions, he grinned. How mistaken he was. Naruto really hasn't changed. Using the clone jutsu, even though he completely failed at them at the academy, isn't going to work on A. Shikamaru said in a bored tone as Hinata silently supported her crush. The sound of the clones popping their knuckles interrupted him. Hinata looked at Shikamaru in confusion and remarked, illusions don't pop their knuckles. Every clone looked at the original, who nodded at them. Together, they drew a kunai and hurled it at Neji. The Hyuga got ready to dodge the approaching projectiles after realizing they were physical. But the clones thought of something else. Shadow Kunai Clone Jutsu was yelled by all of Naruto as they formed the ram seal. 10 kunai joined by what appeared to be 10,000 kunai. Neji perspired, thinking, shoot, I didn't believe I would have to use this. Then he spun around immediately, shouting, rotation. Just as the first kunai were about to hit their target, a dome of blue chakra encircled Neji. They all turned into puffs of smoke or bounced off. When Neji completed his jutsu, the Hyuga was grinning at the original Naruto. This jutsu is the ultimate defense. You have no chance of. As the clones all hurled more kunai at the prodigy, he paused in the middle of his statement. He then started to spin once more. When Hinata returned to the sidelines, she was astounded to discover that Neji was proficient in the rotation. Shikamaru's thoughts were entirely different. The genius then asked, if he knows he can't hurt him when he performs that jutsu, why is Naruto? I hope Naruto wins, the lavender-eyed Kunoichi whispered. She was sure he would try his hardest, but Neji was really strong. Naruto will prevail, so she must have faith in him. I think he will, Shikamaru said, sounding a little intrigued. I mean, I never thought that Naruto would even dream to use that tactic. The expression on his face read, watch and see, as Hinata gave him a questioning glance. Neji stopped spinning, and although he had a little perspiration on his forehead, his smirk remained fixed. When Neji noticed that Naruto was going to launch another volley, he immediately spun around once more. I told you, nothing can. He didn't hear the thudding kunai sounds, and now that he thinks about it, he didn't hear the last one either. He heard Naruto's clones laughing as he stopped spinning, exhausted beyond belief. Out of laughter, one of the clones exclaimed, gee, what a dumbbell. We didn't even throw the last 2 volleys, we just faked it. Neji stood there, exhausted and furious, while the other clones joined in and laughed the loudest. The Hyuga exclaimed, what's so funny, loser, in a strained and weary voice. This fight isn't over. Raising their eyebrows in unison, they mocked, really? Says the one who's all out of chakra. Hinata now understood that Naruto was wasting Neji's chakra by forcing him to repeatedly use the rotation. Neji was now practically defenseless. Wham! Neji had made room for a Naruto classic with a new name. The clones screamed, Leaf. M.A.L. Strom, as they each kicked him, the first in the back, the second in the stomach, and the final 2 on his sides. The foot of the real Naruto and the final words of the attack, Tidal Wave Barrage, greeted Neji as he shot through the air like a mortar bullet. It goes without saying that Neji was now making a direct course for the firm ground. The Naruto clones all poofed away in a cloud of smoke as he struck the ground. Not as gracefully as he would have liked, Naruto landed directly next to the semi-conscious Neji, but beggars cannot be chosen. He looked down at Neji, who in a weary, exhausted voice said, How did I lose? You're just a failure. Not even a genin. How? After he managed to roll over onto his side. Naruto's face was stern, but his eyes were emotionless. I am not bound by fate. Neither are you, he said in a clear and composed voice. I won because I chose to win. He then started to approach Hinata and Shikamaru, turning away from the vanquished ninja, whose face was displaying intense contemplation and introspection. Even though Hinata was flushed, she was still able to stammer, That was B. Brilliant and Naruto.kun. His cheeks developed a slight, hardly perceptible flush, which the Nara noticed. It appears that he has a crush on Hinata, but why does he constantly yell about how much he likes Sakura? Why am I even considering this, I wonder? I'm not concerned about this. After examining Hinata's lavender eyes for a moment, Naruto realized that despite all the evidence he had seen, he was in the past, a past with Hinata. Then he noticed that he was looking at Hinata, whose cheeks were now glimmering like a brilliant light. He abruptly shifted the topic of conversation by muttering, sorry about the mess. He pointed to the small crater and the kunai that were all over the place. Hinata, who was still flushed bright red, did nothing to ease this awkward situation. He was staring at me, but why? He appeared so joyful and satisfied. Does he? Circa could he? So Naruto, he said, causing both of the lovebirds to jump in surprise, care to explain how you managed to defeat a genin, who has about a year's worth of experience, while you're not even a genin yourself? Shikamaru, who had been as silent as one of his shadows, decided to break the silence. As he considered his response, Naruto bit his lip. Okay, this is vexing. I must confess that I went a bit too far in that altercation, beating up, and I was foolish enough to do it in front of Shikamaru. He will be suspicious of my rapid character change, but I doubt he will discover I'm from the future. Hopefully, he will accept my playing the fool defense. Well, Naruto said calmly, looks like the cat's out the bag. He chuckled a little when he sensed Shikamaru and Hinata's curious looks as they waited for the blonde to share his story. You see, I'm not really an idiot. Or at least at the level of idiocy you think I am. Hinata became even more intrigued and questioned, W. What do you mean? W, were you page pretending to be an idiot all this time? S. Since you joined the A Academy? Shikamaru arched an eyebrow. In an attempt to avoid looking too closely at Hinata's stunning face, Naruto turned to face her and responded, yeah, it was just an act, son, I mean Hinata. Chan. Oh. He turned his head away from her, his whisker lines contrasting with his flushed face. Shikamaru was the only one asking Naruto to go on, nodding his head as Hinata started to flush too. It was very annoying. His red stain was finally beginning to fade. He started again. Well, the reason why I acted like an idiot was to get noticed by people. Why need to act like an idiot? If you got the smarts? Shikamaru asked, his eyebrow muscles working hard today as the hairs above his eyelids rose once more. Like they ever paid attention to me. Did you ever once notice them asking me if I knew what the answer was for a question in class, before Iruka became the teacher, that is? Naruto interrupted the genius with a mocking bark of laughter and a tone that matched. After giving it some thought, Shikamaru realized that it was true. No teacher had ever acknowledged Naruto's existence. Indeed, he recalled an instance in which he witnessed Naruto eagerly filling out a test paper. Shikamaru had simply not bothered with it, and when the teacher picked it up, he tossed it into the trash without even looking at it. In retrospect, it seems strange how the teachers handled Naruto both before and after he began playing practical jokes. The other adults were also treating him like a leper, in addition to the teachers. Why? Why did they behave that way toward him? And why do I find this so fascinating? Oh, how annoying. Hinata was also aware of Naruto's topic. She had witnessed the adults avoiding him, overheard them calling him a demon, and much more. Even before he started playing tricks, she had always felt sorry for him because he was pushed away for no apparent reason other than that he was alive. In addition, all of the pranks involving paint bombs were harmless, with the exception of the one in the teacher's lounge and the other beneath a chair. Naruto said, since silence is a form of assent, I take it you agree with me, which caused both of his listeners to stop thinking deeply. After they turned back to him, one of their faces displayed slackness, while the other displayed shame. Naruto went on to explain, so yeah, that's why I played the fool. Even went so far as to pretend to like Sakura. He shuddered violently at the thought. As the pineapple's mind began to wonder more, The Hyuga's heart began to feel happier and more hopeful. She said, "You don't like Sakura," without stuttering and with a hint of joy in her voice. "Don't like," replied Naruto with astonishment. "What's there to like?" He started counting with his fingers and while saying, "First, she hits me with her man-like strength. Secondly, she has the voice and pitch of a banshee, with the face to match. Thirdly, how many people do you see with bubble.gum pink hair? I wouldn't be surprised if there were strands of it among her hair roots. And finally, she is as hollow as a rotten, wooden music block. Not to mention as off-key as one to boot. I only pretended to like her to annoy the stupid Uchiha. The day I would want to date her is the day that pigs, Ino not included, can fly." After he concluded his tirade, Shikamaru was certain that Naruto didn't like Sakura, which is the biggest understatement of the year. However, Hinata was dancing to the samba in her head. Hinata's inner voice was yelling, "Yes. Naruto hates that bitch. Naruto hates that bitch." She had to agree with it, but her perspiration dried up as her inner voice sang in a samba style. The sound of a throat clearing literally brought them all to their senses. Neji was moving again. Even though his face was a little worn down, a few bruises and the marks of a previous shiner, you could still see the serene, collected expression on his face, along with, dare I say it, nervures. Nevertheless, Naruto tightened his grip on his hands a little, and the others were tense. Hinata grew afraid and Shikamaru stiffened. Looking directly into Naruto's eyes, Neji said softly, "Naruto, I apologize for calling you a loser." His tone was a little flat, but Naruto relaxed his hold and softened the harshness in his eyes that he had not noticed in himself because he could tell that Neji was sincere. Naruto's response was neutral rather than harsh, and he gestured to Hinata. "I think, I'm not the one you should be apologizing to," he said. Neji nodded and turned to face Hinata, who was quiet but not as embarrassed as she had ever been around Naruto. While maintaining eye contact with the lavender-eyed girl, Neji made a small bow and said, "Hinata Sama, I apologize for my rudeness. I shouldn't have called you a failure either," in an apologetic but somewhat forceful tone. This surprised Hinata because she was the black sheep of the clan and had never been referred to as Sama by any Hyuga. As Neji was about to straighten up, Naruto said, "Neji, I'd just like to point out one thing, before you go." Neji turned to face Naruto slowly, his face displaying a look of wonder as he speculated about what the blonde would say next. Neji became somewhat agitated, but he still listened to Naruto. "I know that you probably hate the main branch," Naruto said in a calm, even voice, "and rightly so. Putting seals that can fry your brain with a single hand gesture on people that's supposed to be your own family never seemed right to me. Now with that in mind, do you think Hinata is weak or kind?" This perplexed everyone, but Shikamaru was only perplexed for a brief moment before Naruto went on to ask the two Hyugas, explaining what he meant when he said, "Because, if you think about it, couldn't she have activated your birdcage seal during those times that you tutored her?" Neji's face lit up with shock and realization, while Hinata simply hung her head, as if the thought of her doing such a thing was disgusting. Neji took note of this and read her actual feelings. As he stood there, thinking quietly, he asked himself, "Am I a stubborn coward or a genius?" As though reading the boy's thoughts, the blonde declared out loud, "Anyone can make mistakes, but not all have the chance to make up for them." It was as though the boy was answering his own question. Neji, Hinata, Shikamaru, who was by now feeling very drowsy, and Naruto stood silently, one gazing at the soul search of the other, while the others either gazed in wonder at the person watching or at the person in question. Hinata Sama, I honestly, truly am sorry for all the wrongs I have committed against you. I was being stupid, blinded by my arrogance and anger, of being called the Hyuga prodigy, while being looked down upon by the other main branch members. I used you to vent my rage, unjustly though it was. If there's any way I can make amends, all you need do is ask, Neji said as he sank into another bow after what felt like hours had passed. Hinata was in disbelief, her cheeks showing no signs of blush. She was experiencing a range of emotions, including relief, surprise, and others, which left her feeling neither timid nor brave. She turned to face Naruto, the person she secretly loved and who had drastically changed her once cold, heartless cousin. The blonde's blue eyes captivated Hinata as their gazes locked. The calm, authoritative, and reassuring gaze she had only ever seen in the eyes of one man, the third Hokage. With a single nod, Naruto gave Hinata the strength she required while maintaining eye contact with her lavender pupils. With a calm, clear voice, she said, "Neji, thank you." The boy looked up, his eyes displaying shock that she had forgiven him so easily. Her eyes were now on Neji, who who was still in a low bow. With a steady, unstuttering voice, she went on, I always knew that you were angry, that you blamed the main branch for your father's death. As though an old, painful injury had chosen to add salt to the wound without interfering, Neji was sent rigid once more. A tear ran down her cheek as she started to give in to her emotions once more. And since I was weak, where you were strong, but since I was still above you in status, you took your frustration out on me. Still, I never once hated you, for everyone in the main branch, even my father. Then a hand settled on her shoulder, providing the shaky girl with a comforting hold. Startled, she looked around, and her heart nearly leapt out of her chest. The hand belonged to Naruto, and his eyes were now encouraging her in the same way that his hand did. He nodded slightly and smiled, which made Hinata's heartbeat louder and faster. She felt stronger again. She made a small bow of her own and concluded her speech by saying, I look forward to working with you as a kunoichi of this village, and also as my cousin. They too thought me as a failure. But unlike them, you've apologized. A faint smile appeared on Neji's bruised face as he responded, and so am I, as a shinobi and your cousin. He then turned to face Naruto, his expression half respectful and half inquisitive, and concluded, and I look forward to working with you, Naruto. I must admit, I never would have guessed you were so skillful and charismatic. The blonde said, never underestimate you opponent, with a tiny, smug smile on his face. Especially if it's me. He then held out his hand to Neji, who accepted it and shook hands with him in a final gesture of mutual respect. Neji gave them all a final nod as they both lowered their hands to their sides, and he then headed back to the compound, his injuries taking precedence over all else. Following Neji's departure, the three ninjas .be simply stood there until their stomachs rumbled with hunger. Taking a deep breath, Shikamaru remarked, all this excitement has made me forget how hungry I was, how troublesome. Hinata said, me too, and her quiet voice came back, but the stutter had taken a leave of absence. We should probably find somewhere else to eat. Father won't let me bring in non-clan members. Naruto only wished Shikamaru wasn't present. He had hoped to have the opportunity to dine out with Hinata. It would be easier if he didn't have to spread the word to Shikamaru, and he wanted to learn more about her, or at least have a reason for knowing more than he should. All right, Shikamaru said, turning his feet to face the compound gate. Hinata laughed as Naruto shrugged and said, true. How about we eat Ichiraku's? If there's one thing I'm certain I know about you, Naruto, is that you love ramen to death. Naruto had an epiphany as they exited the compound and turned directly down the street. He remembered something as he turned to the left and looked back. On the day of the attack, Hinata wanted to visit a restaurant that had been renovated by. As the kid with the blonde hair exclaimed, hey, guys. Wait a moment, when the other two returned, their faces were filled with questions. Naruto replied, well, even I get sick of eating ramen sometimes. In response to their expressions. With their sanity on the verge of failing, Hinata and Shikamaru exchanged confused glances. Okay, that's it. Who are you and where is Naruto? Shikamaru said, turning and advancing on Naruto while tugging at his face. Naruto clutched a sore cheek and retreated from Shikamaru's attempts to pull his mask off. 1. He's in Konoha, outside the Hyuga compound and standing right in front of you. 2. I am Naruto Sho Uzumaki, soon to be injured by a pineapple-headed boy. Still not convinced that it was Naruto, Hinata performed a few hand signals before exclaiming, Byakugan. Her pupils brightened, and veins grew around her eyes. After giving Naruto a close look and realizing what she was doing, she stopped, her face flushing greatly. She stammered, Yes it's him. Shikamaru.kun. Her face now looking like a red traffic light. Since when was your middle show? Shikamaru glared at Naruto, calculatingly. Since I was born, the blonde gave a sardonic response. The old man had left my birth certificate in his office, lying on the side. I took a peep and found out about my middle name. This was not entirely accurate. In order to locate his certificate, he had to sift through thousands and thousands of piles of paperwork, and that was in the future. Right, as I was saying, like any sensible-minded person, I occasionally get sick of having ramen. So I've got an idea of someplace else to eat. Naruto continued, indicating the left turn that they took at the Hyuga compound gate, in an attempt to change the topic. I heard that there's a new shop that sells Chinese food on the go. It's quite a wide selection, I hear, and they've got their own seats, just like Ichiraku's. Hinata, who had recovered from her blushing incident, muttered, I've left my money at home. Shikamaru, who was still wary of Naruto, nodded slightly and responded, fine, might as well. But I'm not paying for it, period. Naruto shrugged and took out his old frog wallet, Gamma-chan. Why had he given it a new name? Assuring the group, Naruto says, "All right, I'll pay. But I'll be accepting repayment." After deciding on that, the three of them headed to the superior food stall with Gamma-chan in hand. As soon as they got there, everyone saw the stall with the sign that said, "Kai Eat. Chinese on the go. Opens today." As they entered the stall, they saw that it resembled Ichiraku's almost exactly, but instead of red, it was adorned with blue and green. The chief had dark skin, beady eyes, and a scarred face. He was in his middle years. He said, in a slow, stupid undertone, "Welcome to Kai Eat. I thank you for choosing to eat here and I hope you will enjoy my cooking." He obviously wasn't from Konoha, because anyone from that city would have told Naruto to go hiking. His accent was authentically Chinese. Shikamaru sat on the left, Naruto in the center, and Hinata on his right as the three children took their seats. Although the leather seats were comfortable, Naruto, a devoted customer, would always choose Ichiraku's over this one. Though it was made to the future Hinata, he was only acting in this way to fulfill a promise. After looking at the menu, which was displayed above the chief's cooking stall, Shikamaru yawned, pressed his arms together, and put his head on the counter after declaring aloud, "I'll have a try of the chicken and prawn rolls, along with a pot of tea, please." Shikamaru, who was napping, had already ordered the drink, so Hinata ordered a dish of duck fried rice. With his eyes fixed on Hinata, who was averting his gaze, Naruto ordered a dish of pork fired rice. Naruto chose to strike up a conversation as the chief hurried off to get their orders ready. They spent the next 5 minutes discussing how was their day, and other such interesting subjects. Hinata was once again tense, which made it hard for Naruto to begin a conversation about anything other than the weather. Naruto finally found a topic that could lead to much more after a few minutes, with their food about to be served. Who do they think they'll be paired with for their ninja teams? "Well," began Hinata with a blush the size of a walnut, "since I have the Byakugan, I think I'll get paired with Kiba and Shino. Father once said that Hyugas are either put into close combat squads or trackers. I am no good at fighting, so I'll only be useful for my Byakugan. Shino will have his bugs, which can be used to drain people's chakra, and Kiba has got Akamaru. They always do everything together." Naruto flinched when he heard their names because Hinata would always become melancholy and depressed whenever their names were mentioned in the future. In the future, Shino had been a decent man and a level-headed individual. His death, like all of his comrades, was constantly in the back of his mind. Although Kiba and Naruto shared many characteristics, the most concerning of these was their resemblance to a particular girl with lavender eyes. Even after he became Hokage, he had deadpanned Naruto after learning that he and Hinata were dating. Although Naruto had never felt as though he had taken Hinata from him, he did observe that she had a slight attraction to the semi-dog ninja. As a result, they harbored some animosity toward one another for the ensuing years. They had a heated argument on the eve of Kiba's last mission, which ultimately led to his death. Naruto's final words were, "Get the fuck out of my office, you fucking bitch spawn." He had always scolded himself for that, and when he was feeling particularly down, he accused himself of sending them to their deaths because he had an imaginary belief that he was attempting to take Hinata away from him. Out of guilt, he tried to avoid her after that, but on the day of the attack, he gave up. Back to the present, though, Hinata was trying to avoid looking at the blonde boy out of shyness, so she didn't notice him wince. In order to fill the void, Naruto chose to share his own knowledge or opinion about potential teammates. "Well, if it is those two, yeah, then you are very lucky. Kiba is an ass sometimes and Shino can sometimes be a bit weird. But I'm probably going to be landed with that shank. Sakura and Imo Uchiha. Sakura will probably be utterly useless and Sasuke will probably do a Uchiha." "And Uchiha?" Hinata inquired, raising her eyebrows in perplexity. Then he explained. "You know, do what Uchiha does best. Run away and betray anyone in sight. I mean, let's look at their track record." He started counting with his fingers. 1. Madara Uchiha. Betrayed the village by trying to kill the first Hokage. Itachi Uchiha. Killed his family then became a S-class ninja. And apparently, on the night the Kyuubi attacked, the Uchiha were said to have left the moment the thing appeared on the horizon. Reason why so many ninjas died trying to kill that thing, they were expecting back from them. I heard there was a lot of discrimination coming from the other ninja clans because of that. And since there's only one left, our favorite emo king, they practically showered him with praise, just to keep him from doing an Uchiha, and go after his brother and make the Sharingan extinct in the processes. Upon concluding his lengthy tirade, he observed that Hinata had become extremely quiet. Soon enough, she spoke up and asked. Is that why you don't like him? Because he gets all the praise of being a genius without any effort while you get pushed on the sidelines? Yep, Naruto said, acknowledging that his small plot to explain why he didn't like Sasuke had succeeded. After all, it didn't make sense for him to compete with Sasuke while already being a smarty pants. As their food was finally ready to be served, Naruto thought, plus, he looks like traitor material. I wasn't kidding when I said he would probably leave. But, he might prove me wrong. Or I'll have to kill him. I can't let him fall into the hands of either Madara or Orochimaru. If he gets the curse mark, he'll try to leave the village. If he kills Itachi, Madara will manipulate him into attacking Konoha. I'm still not sure why, as Madara had planned to kill the entire Uchiha clan for betraying him when he attempted to overthrow the first Hokage, according to the notes left by Itachi and discovered in the original Akatsuki hideout. Sasuke was only alive because Itachi threatened to reveal the truth about the Uchiha's own co-op data to Madara, who he collaborated with to kill the clan, and the foolish council members who had ordered him to kill his family. This would have caused Konoha to become unstable and lead to another ninja war, which I believe was serious because Itachi was a pacifist. Either Sasuke was under some sort of genjutsu, or he was just plain stupid, but I think the latter comes first. Naruto, Hinata, and Shikamaru, who had roused from his slumber, had started eating during this period of ranting. Shikamaru ate his rolls slowly, taking as few bites as he could, if only to savor the flavor. If this was done to savor the flavor, he should stop talking to the other two, who ate as slowly as he did. Naruto was now glad Shikamaru was present because Hinata felt more comfortable with another person, which allowed them to talk freely. They had discussed their likes and dislikes, hobbies, favorite pastimes, in which Naruto shocked the other two by revealing his love of art, and finally, as they poured the last drops of the brew into each cup, ninja skills, as the rice grains vanished from their bowls and the tea was only halfway consumed. Well, Shikamaru began, his bored tone barely disguised by a faint margarine. I can perform the shadow possession jutsu, which is our clan's specialty. I find it difficult to work too hard, and discovering that was the most difficult thing I have ever done. That's about it. Naruto made the amiable remark, you find all work troublesome, which made Hinata laugh and Shikamaru mutter, you guessed it, troublesome blondes. In the early future, before the war had tainted Konoha's mood, Naruto would finish his missions, later paperwork, draw a little doodle or landscape portrait, and then hang out with his friends. Either over a drink, a bowl of ramen, or a box of dango. Naruto smiled, his hand setting down the half-finished cup of tea. This was one of the many things he had missed. A good old conversation unrelated to Sasuke or Akatsuki. He missed those last moments, when he spent time with his girlfriend and friends, because Sasuke's wanton destruction and death had taken them away. Either there was no time to hang out, or the people you hung out with were either dead or dying. Returning to the discussion, Naruto started his own assessment of his skills by stating, well, as you saw with my fight with Neji, my specialties are the shadow clone and kunai jutsu. He had an epiphany that could prove useful later on, and he only needed to hint. But I did find this scroll, in the old man's office, that had some jutsus I could probably use in the future. Like what? Naruto.kun, Hinata said rather quietly. After finishing his tea and setting the cup on the counter, he said, well, there were some basic chakra control exercises for one. Very useful, he said. However, different exercises were also utilized for elemental jutsus. With his cups lowered from his lips, Shikamaru, who was about to finish his drink, inquired, elemental jutsus? Why did you look in this scroll in the first place, and isn't that CA rank material? Hey, if that's what you mean, I didn't steal it, Naruto said, raising his hands. My name was actually on it. The genius said, really, in a tone that was a little accusing and sardonic. Who would leave something like that in the Hokage's office, apparently with your name on it? Both Shikamaru and Hinata knew that Naruto was an orphan, alone since he was a child. Which now seems very strange to the two teenagers. But based on the sound of his voice, this subject, of his father, seemed a little sore. Apparently, it was my father. Naruto's voice was quiet, but anyone could hear the slight sadness and disgust in his tone. Shikamaru bit his lip, and Hinata looked away, feeling guilty. What was his name, W? Hinata asked in a hesitant, quiet voice, her eyes attempting to meet the blue ones of the blonde. I don't know, he replied with complete composure. All it said was that the writer was my father and that he had left me these jutsus so I would become a better ninja. Well, isn't that good? Even if he didn't mention his name, he still tried to, Shikamaru asked. He could have told me my mother's name, or tell me what she did. In reality, his father had left him techniques to make him stronger, but he had also left details about who he and his wife were or were not. Naruto couldn't go around saying he was the fourth son because the attention the council would give him could cause his lies and stories to fall apart like a house of cards, and he might even be forced to reveal his future secret. The two listeners fell silent, revealing Naruto's reason for his sadness and bitterness, but only of his lie. In order to divert Iruka's attention from the fact that he had been so composed following his first kill, or this time's first, he had only told her that he was the Yellow Flash's son. Hopefully, Iruka and these two won't exchange the tales that the blonde had told them. Deciding to proceed with the convocation, Naruto dismissed it casually, saying, "Enough about me now. Hinata, how about you? What do you excel at?" Her fingers were pressed together, a habit the blonde had not seen in years, and her face flushed, which Naruto found adorable. Well, she said, her voice shaking, have my Circa clan's Jigakai Genkei, the B. Byakugan. Additionally, there is the Juken, our Circa clan's taijutsu. My father doesn't think I'm good at anything. Nor does anyone else in the clan. She said, hanging her head as her rosy red turned pale white, and she continued in a sorrowful, stuttering whisper. When Naruto looked at his crush's face, his stomach clenched painfully, which had nothing to do with the rice that was slowly being digested through the blonde's gut. He knew that in the far future, Hinata would finally get the respect she so desperately wanted from her family, especially her father, but that would come at the cost of seeing both of her teammates die at the hands of the cunning Sasuke. Although she pretended to have moved on after their deaths, she still harbored a deep affection for them. However, Naruto had played the happy-faced Joker, fool, long enough to see through the mask that Hinata had put on, all smiles and cheer when underneath she was just as sad, if not worse. As a fierce, resolute voice in his head screamed, "No, I am not going to put Hinata through that, the feeling that no one wants you or cares about you, ever again. I'll make sure that her father knows that she is worth something." Naruto inadvertently started smashing his empty teacup. The blonde's mind started to form a plan. It was processed, formulated, and approved. He grinned to himself, realizing how straightforward his plan was and how it would help both him and Hinata. She would gain confidence and Naruto would have more time to spend with the lavender-eyed girl. The question was, though, would she be awake long enough to agree? All right. Both Hinata and Shikamaru displayed signs of extreme surprise. Shikamaru, believing Naruto was being tackled, was about to reprimand him harshly until he saw the blonde's face. Hinata, who was offended by the seeming disregard for her embarrassment, started crying until she saw the expression on Naruto's face. Naruto's face? Well, it wasn't cruel, mocking, or anything else negative. Rather, it was serene, comforting, and perhaps older. Hinata and Shikamaru shook their heads as the same phrase flooded their minds. Why older? However, those words were dropped as Naruto spoke, one directly out of his mouth and the other piercing his gray matter with a tone of composure that seemed unthinkable for a boy who had come across as such a loud-mouthed knucklehead. If they don't accept you, then just ignore them. Hinata appeared surprised by these remarks. Disregard them. But they're my family, how can I just ignore what they say? She asked, her voice sounding perplexed but unstuttering. I mean, Naruto continued, his voice regaining the audience's attention, ignore what they say about you. He sighed and rubbed his chin, as if he was trying to find the right words to say, and then he lowered his hands to the counter, somewhere a few centimeters away from Hinata's, after seemingly finding them. Naruto did not respond right away because his gaze was fixed on Hinata, whose blush started to return but sized. Hey, you're aware of how adults dislike me. They call me. He scowled as he tried to recall what they had called him, since it had been so long ago that he had forgotten all of the harsh words they had used. A demon? Shikamaru asked, curious to hear Naruto's next move. Yeah, the blonde admitted, a demon. Thanks Shikamaru, I'd forgotten. Naruto promptly clarified, because I stopped listening to the adults years ago, except Iruka and the old man, of course, before Hinata questioned why he had forgotten the word that had been whispered behind his back to scare off kids from playing with him. Shikamaru gave a little in response to these words, while Hinata continued to look perplexed because she had not yet received Naruto's message. You see, Hinata. I ignore them calling me a demon, along with their other forms of insults and shunning. Why they do it I have no idea, and I just become myself, Naruto said, pleased that at least one person had understood his point. I played tricks on the other kids by myself because they didn't play with me. I trained alone because the academy wasn't supporting me, and I learned more there than I did there, until Iruka started teaching, of course. So, he went on, a faint smile gradually appearing on his face. If your family doesn't accept you because you can't live up to their expectations, to be a Hyuga, then don't accept them and go your own way. Be who you are. Work hard and don't give up on something you're good at, despite criticism from others or your own shortcomings. The end will be worthwhile, even though the journey may be difficult and exhausting. In addition to realizing your goals, you might make some new friends who will accept you. Additionally, you have made genuine friendships with other people, so if your family still despises you, screw them. After these final, motivational words, there was silence. Shikamaru had been pleasantly surprised, or funded, as he gaped at the whiskered blonde a little, and Hinata had also been taken aback by Naruto's charisma, as she was gaping at him, albeit in awe. Naruto, pleased with the impact his speech had on his friends, was now waiting for them to comment, or at the very least, to stop staring at him. The minutes seemed to pass slowly, then. Good words, young one. The three ninjas all jumped at once. Shikamaru's eyes widened wider than they had ever been awake, and Hinata let out a little meep that actually sounded pretty cute. Naruto literally leapt out of his seat, his knees slamming into the counter, and the trio's leftover food was flung an inch into the air before miraculously returning to its original location in a tidy pile. The three children watched the brief plate acrobatics demonstration before turning to face the stall owner, who seemed to have overheard their conversation from the beginning. The chief started talking, disregarding the fact that his plates were at eye level, and his voice had the nostalgic quality of a warrior recounting to a large crowd a significant battle he had once imagined. He scowled, making the scars on his forehead even more obvious. Well, I think he's back home on a mission. My family didn't accept me either. Parents were ex-shinobi and my brother. He gave a little huff of anger and went on, anyway, his voice returning to its storyteller mode. My family wanted me to be a shinobi, and the main reason was family tradition. I never saw him on the day I left for Konoha, even though he had promised to be there. I realized that I wasn't cut out to be a shinobi when I was 17 years old and my brother had just been born. I was still a genin, and my teammates were junin. With an unusual expression of curiosity, Shikamaru interrupted, but if you were 17, then you must have fought in the ninja war. Yes, I was, the man said, nodding slowly as his left hand started to move toward the scars on his forehead. Konoha went to the small villages surrounding the Land of Fire to recruit more ninjas because they needed more. Both of my parents had lost their middle fingers on a mission, so they were already retired and unfit to serve. I therefore enlisted in the military at the age of 8. I was 15 when I graduated. Observing the strange looks from his audience, he paused and asked, "Why did you graduate at 15? Hinata asked hesitantly, her voice remaining unstuttering. "They trained us till our legs gave way back then," the man replied in jest, with a toothy grin that showed a few missing teeth. "We almost all drowned in our scrolls from the sheer volume of jutsus, fighting techniques, and medical instruction they provided." Following these remarks, he let out a loud bark of laughter, and the three of them gasped as they attempted to picture what the academy would look like if this training regimen were still in place. The tone of this final remark, especially the part about the civilian council, was a little flat. But these days, thanks to civilian council and their complaints about how much it would cost to give any decent training, your school days are a breeze. But let's get back to my tale. He looked down at his seated audience and saw a question, which he quickly responded to. "Don't get me wrong, I wasn't a bad shinobi," he said, adding, "I realized that, at 17, being a shinobi wasn't my calling. Here." He then abruptly brought his hands together, and with the speed of any seasoned shinobi, his 8 fingers and 2 thumbs started spelling out animals. He finished with a bird, a common water jutsu seal, and then he released his hand. When his arm was fully extended, with the tips of his fingers just an inch past the edge of the counter, he yelled, for obvious effect, "Water style. Lotus deal." When he said, "Lotus," a tiny, transparent bud of clear water appeared in the stall owner's palm. It then opened up, revealing tiny, shimmering water petals that were all different colors in the sunlight. When the lotus was fully bloomed, the man raised his other hand, straightening 2 centered fingers, and then, as quickly as a bullet, wrapped the water plant with both fingers. As soon as his fingers touched the lotus's watery surface, an exact replica seemed to fly out the other side, just over the tips of his outstretched fingers. The 3 ninjas whirled in their seats as they watched the flying plant's flight, while the man behind them closed his eyes and spread out his fingers with his free hand, which he had used to strike the water. Molded plant. The mid-flight lotus broke into pieces, revealing a cloud of water petals that, despite their disorganized appearance, were entirely under the stall owner's control. His eyes were now open in a focused glare, and he made small movements with his free hand. Curious about how this jutsu worked, Naruto turned to see what the stall owner was doing. The blonde quickly realized what the man was doing and would do, and by the time he turned around again, he saw the cloud split into individual petal drops. Naruto marveled at the man's skill and thought, dang. Elemental manipulation is always a bitch to learn, but discovering how to control individual strands of an element, even if it isn't in mid-flight, is on another level entirely. In time to witness the jutsu's finale, he halted his mental admiration. The petals started flying in the direction of a house's wall, and as they got within an inch of the wall, they started to grow again. Thousands of lotuses were in the air in a flash, all of them hurtling in the direction of a poor, unlucky wall. The first lotus struck the wall, causing a loud crush. It was surprising that the wall remained intact after roughly 1,000 lotuses struck it with the force of 1,000 sledgehammers, even though the house appeared to have moved a few inches. Naruto and Hinata were both stunned into awe. Inspiring silence, while Shikamaru slowly turned around and questioned incredulously, only a genin. With a sly smile, the man shrugged and responded, skill is unaffected by rank. In reality, I worked as a medic in a military hospital on the home front. During my limited free time, I practiced Lotus Steel, a jutsu. I didn't get to use it until I was 17. His eyes appeared to be struggling with an unpleasant memory, and his face was now blank, with his hands by his sides. The commanders believed that a battalion of stone ninjas was preparing to attack a forest with a clear path to a land of grass village, so I was deployed to the front lines as an emergency medic. And they were right. They ambushed us while we were asleep, and his face was wrinkled with a look of exhaustion and pain that seemed to flicker across its lines. As soon as the assault began, half of my friends were killed. He glanced at his right hand, which the three listeners now saw had a large scar slashed across the palm, and said, a stray kunai slashed my hand when I exited the med tent. I was working on a guy's broken leg before the attack, so I was one of the first to realize we were under attack. Upon examining its origin, I discovered roughly 20 ninja, all of whom were wearing the rock headbands and were shooting kunai in all directions. The trick behind multiple elemental manipulations, he declared, still staring at the back of his hand, is more than concentration. He sat down on a concealed stool behind the counter and started idly examining his right hand. You need a lot of willpower. After you've mastered that, you'll be able to focus, like a secondary eye, behind the element you're controlling when you execute any multiple elemental jutsu, like the one I just demonstrated. If you've played Dark Sector, it's similar to the After Touch ability, which allows you to steer the glade by seeing it. He shivered as a look of staring at a forgotten and unpleasant memory etched on his face. So, as I directed each of my lotuses into each of the rock ninjas' chests, I saw each of their final looks of horror as I took their lives. Both Hinata and Shikamaru experienced phobic discomfort as a result of the horrific image that this man must have seen in their minds. Being accustomed to death, Naruto figured out why this man, who appeared to possess exceptional skill, was preparing Chinese food without his name being recorded in history. The man went on, his face and voice now relaxed and calm. My spurious wanted me to be prompted so I can fight on the front lines. As I just about saved our group from being wiped out, I said no. What? Both the Hyuga and the Nara cried, their faces displaying expressions of utter surprise. With her usual shyness completely forgotten, Hinata asked, why? Why did you refuse? She found it strange that this man simply forfeited the opportunity to gain recognition from his family after demonstrating his value to his fellow ninja. You won't understand, you haven't experienced it yet, but you will. There will come a time, in each of your ninja carriers, where you must take a life. Some people get over it. Some people discover they get a kick from it. The man said, giving Hinata a kind of pitying look in his cool, low voice. And some people discover, Naruto said, face expressionless but his voice calm, that they can't cope with taking lives and quit. The man nodded, glaring at Naruto with his beady eyes. Then, with his coolness intact, he halted and declared, yes, that's correct. And I'm just that I'm afraid. He gave each of them a look of innocence and youth before saying, look, I'm not telling you not to become a ninja. But if you're not prepared to kill, then you might as well quit while you're ahead. Hinata and Shikamaru looked at one another as they both wandered aimlessly. Choosing to put this gloomy topic behind him, Naruto asked, so what happened next? Seeing the slight panic he had caused, the man went on with his story, his storytelling voice causing the troubled pair to break their stares. Naruto had never thought of this man as a coward, but his doubts were allayed when he heard these words. Well, after I refused the offer to become a Junin, I was sent back to the home front to help the wounded. I stayed till the end of the war to help the wounded. I wasn't going to let people die just because I got cold feet at being a shinobi. After the war, I handed in my headband and returned to my village. I was greeted with a 7-year-old brother and 2 pissed-off parents. Not only had I not learned the clan's secret jutsus, like they wanted me to, but I had quit being a ninja. They were so annoyed by this they disowned me and threw me out on the streets. With the exception of the part about throwing out on the street, Hinata could relate to this. Without even glancing at her, her own father had disowned her, focusing instead on his second daughter, Hanabi. He scratched his head and scowled once more. But even so, I still had friends and my brother didn't hate me. He said. Or at least, I think he didn't hate me. He was very hard to read. He continued to frown until Naruto coughed lightly, seemingly to communicate that he was still present. He stopped grinning and continued his tale. Well, during my stay at my friend's house, I discovered that I had a flair for Chinese cuisine. So, after learning tons of recipes and creating a few of my own, I announced to the village that I was moving to Konoha to open a food stand. My parents tried to stop me, begging me to reconsider being a ninja again. But I found my calling and I wasn't going to stop it to do something I don't want. So after traveling by cart, finding accommodations and getting building permission, I am here talking to you now. Since the others were still processing the story they had just heard, Naruto was the first to speak. Thanks for telling us that, mister. With a jovial wave of his hand, the chef grinned. Please, just call me Rai. My last name is embarrassing. After giving a nod, Naruto started removing his wallet, also known as Gamma-chan. Rai turned to Hinata as he was taking some notes out of the frog's overstuffed wallet. Now, miss. Hinata immediately jumped, both from being called miss, and from being jerked out of her reverie. There was no disputing either of Rai's statements, so Hinata simply nodded as he went on in a comforting tone. From what I've heard, you have some family problems too. Maybe a few confidence too. Well, just you bear in mind that there is nothing wrong with striking out on your own. I tried that too, as a ninja, because I found my family's jutsus difficult to learn. When I realized that being a ninja wasn't my cup of tea, I found purpose in cooking. So just remember what that young man has said. He motioned to Naruto, who was acting as a notes. That when you found your calling, give it all you've got and don't give a rat's ass about anyone who says you can't do it. At these words, she giggled a little, and the other 2 boys smiled a little as well. Then she had an idea that made her ask, but how can I find something different? My family won't let me near the public library, just our private one. Rai's forehead was furrowed in contemplation as he pressed his finger to his lips. He responded simply, well, all 3 of you are ninjas, right? After a few seconds had passed during which Naruto had located the appropriate number of notes and Shikamaru had placed his head on his arms on the counter. Both Naruto and Hinata nodded, and Shikamaru also gestured his head into his arms in agreement. Then why don't you train together? With a drowsy grunt of, to troublesome, into his folded arms, Shikamaru's emotions were clear. Unaware that he was taking out his money, Naruto sat bolt upright. Although the blonde's face appeared blank to the outside world, he was cheering on the inside. Rai, thank you, I would have had to ask her myself, but you saved me the trouble, she might not faint this way. But Hinata's cheeks turned cherry red, and she was perilously close to that particular bodily shutdown. The lavender-eyed girl looked shyly at Naruto, whose face was still unreadable and blank, and thought, training. With Naruto? Well, but he wouldn't. He did fight Neji for me, though, and he seems different. No shit. With his lunch money still clasped in his hand, Naruto turned to Hinata after a minute of mental celebration, and another for mental reassurance. His face was no longer unreadable, and he now displayed a shyness that was on par with Hinata's. Hinata's own blush vanished when she saw Naruto's own beacons turn red. The girl was shocked to learn that the boy who had just displayed such charisma was now mumbling like a school-age child when he asked her out on a date. So, Hinata, she said. How about it, training? At first, Hinata did not respond, her blush apparently being transferred to the blonde. I understand if you don't want to do it. Naruto, who now resembled a traffic light, except that his green light was bright orange, interpreted the pause as a no. As soon as Hinata heard Naruto's sullen and dejected tone, she shook her head and said, no, it's alright. I'd like that, actually. She smiled sheepishly, holding back some of the blush that Naruto had seemingly stolen. Naruto raised his head and met her lavender eyes with his own. Really, you mean it? I mean. He hung his head, his face finally looking heavy with blush. After a moment of admiring how adorable this scene was, Rai decided to break the ice with another story and some more advice. Oh, you two remind me of when I was an academy student. There was a girl I used to hang out with, was as shy as anything. You wouldn't call her shy now. Heck, I would have never believed that she was ever shy if I hadn't met her. Rai appeared to recall pleasant, old memories, and his eyes soon became hazy. He sighed and brushed some imaginary dust from his shoulders. Oh, yeah. Those were the days when I dreamed to be a famous ninja. Now my dream is... Shucks. He said. I think I've kept you three for long enough. No, gone on, inquired Naruto and Hinata, both of whom were interested in hearing from this man they had come to respect so quickly. Shikamaru propped his head on one side to allow his ear to point up at the topic of conversation, but he seemed uninterested. Well, Rai said slowly at first, clearly enjoying the opportunity to share more tales. He pointed to his stand's interior walls and said, my dream now is to make this stand a restaurant. He sighed and raised his gaze to the ceiling, a look of longing on his face. And on the opening day, I dream that my parents will walk through the restaurant door, sit down and begin to talk about what they're going to eat. Then I'll get up to their table and take their order. They won't say anything yet, not till I come back with their meal in record time. And after they eat my food, they'll both stand up and say, that's our son, Rai, the great chef and owner of Kai restaurant. Rai removed one tear from his cheek as the splendor of his dream filled him. Naruto hung his head, this time with a heavy burden of guilt, while Hinata and Shikamaru grinned at the Rai's dream of acceptance. He was well aware that Rai's parents would not enter his restaurant on the day Kai opens. Perhaps a sound ninja would, but not his parents. Instead of sitting down to discuss what to order, they would go to the counter and place Rai's head on a platter. The image of Rai, grinning broadly from behind his restaurant counter while he waited for his parents to enter, is just one of the many things Naruto regrets about that day. In retrospect, Rai's family would have been killed by Sasuke's army as they pillaged the Land of Fire, just like they did every other elemental nation, even if the invasion had not occurred that day. No, Naruto thought, clenching his fists in rage. Now that I'm here, I can prevent that day from ever occurring. I will ensure that Rai's parents enter his home, even if I have to force them to do so myself. I will also save my friends and my village. He looked up, his face displaying a determined expression. This was soon abandoned, and a genuine look of happiness, one that wasn't overdone, was emerging on his face. Thanks for the food, and the stories, Naruto said cheerfully as he extended his hand towards Rai, who was sitting, noticing that he was still holding a handful of crisp yen notes, Japanese currency. It was my pleasure, Rai replied, removing the yen from Naruto's hands while still seated. Hey, you've given me too much, cried Rai as Naruto and Hinata got to their feet, Shikamaru still attempting to fake sleep. Rai attempted to return a couple of yen notes to the blonde, but Naruto paused. The boy pushed the note back after placing a hand on Rai's bare fist, saying, no, it's for your restaurant, keep it. After a moment of surprise, Rai nodded and placed the yen in a little box beneath the counter. Thank you. The blonde said, Naruto Uzumaki. He turned to Shikamaru and yelled, you coming, lazy brains? With a huff. Both he and Hinata left after saying, fine, suit yourself. They both tried to have a conversation without one of them blushing like a tomato. Before anyone spoke in the Kai and eat stand, Rai was cleaning up the mess from the trio's meal while Shikamaru rested his head. In order to break the silence, Rai muttered, why? After concluding that it was impossible to sleep here, Shikamaru raised his head and asked, what do you mean by why? Rai asked, why do people call that boy a demon? With a puzzled and disgusted expression on his scarred face. I've been in Konoha for a week and every time I've heard of that kid, the person utters his name in contempt. He pranked everyone, Shikamaru said. I always thought it was because of. He shook his head and pointed in the direction Naruto and Hinata went, his face tinged with bewildered rage. And after talking with him, I really can't understand why they call him such things. The only thing that bothered me was. Rai said, trying to find the right words. No, he said. I don't think it's got anything to do with pranks. The way they talk about him, it must go a lot deeper than pranks. He seemed older. Rai's head slowly started to nod as his eyes widened in surprise. Yes, that is the exact word I thought. It's just, I really don't know why. He's only a kid, but his voice. He then sheepishly shook his head. I just can't put my finger on it. That kid is a mystery. He didn't act like how the villagers say he acts. Shikamaru's eyes were fixed on the spot where Naruto and Hinata had turned a corner, and he was only partially paying attention to Rai. You're right about that, Rai, Shikamaru thought, his eyes still glaring hard and calculatingly at the wall wedge behind which Naruto vanished. It is unbelievable to me that Naruto, who always appeared to be such a complete moron, would have feigned everything in order to gain the attention of the adults. Furthermore, why do all adults, with the exception of a select few, hate Naruto? All he ever did was pull a few practical jokes, so it just doesn't add up. Even more problematic is the sense that he ought to be older than his actual age. Shikamaru reviewed his options as he got to his feet, his legs moving automatically. The first, and best, option was to ignore Naruto and completely abandon the conversation. Shikamaru knew that Naruto must be concealing something, so the seconded was to learn the blonde's secret. He soon came to a fork in the road. A right turn would take him to Naruto, since he and Hinata had gone there, and a left turn would take him directly home. Shikamaru considered both turns, his thoughts determining not only his path but also his next move. He turned 90 degrees at that moment and muttered, "It will be a complete and utter drag. But if I leave it now, it will be a constant drag." The youthful, slothful genius started to walk forward, following Naruto's route. Shikamaru let out an unusual cry as his own figure vanished around the corner. "This will be troublesome, but I will find out your secret, Naruto Sho Uzumaki." Many hours later, the door of Naruto's apartment opened, revealing a sweaty, exhausted, and shopping. Heavy blonde as the blue sky of the day gave way to the gray clouds of the night. As he stumbled toward his apartment table, the 3 bags of clothes, food, and equipment weighed down his right side. Naruto wiped a drop of perspiration from his forehead and placed the bags of rare goods, rare for him, anyway. The boy rubbed the back of his hand across his face and noticed his image in the mirror. Observing his appearance without a jumpsuit, he grinned to himself. He had asked Hinata to help him with shopping, a task he had never been able to do, after they had left Kaiite. Equipped with 2 hinges and some fashion advice from a girl, the couple stormed the best clothing store in Konoha. Hinata played the part of a kind faced, slightly plump mother, whereas Naruto was a sweet-faced, gray-haired civilian boy. With her assistance, they were able to deceive those who had vowed to never sell Naruto even a ragged cloth. They also assisted him in locating attire that was both sophisticated and understated, the kind of clothing a shinobi would wear on a public mission that would blend in with the background when necessary. Returning to the present, Naruto was looking in the mirror at his new favorite outfits in his apartment. He was dressed in a black short-sleeved t-shirt with orange stripes running from the bottom corners to under his armpits, and a pair of baggy, dark gray trousers. His dark green jacket, which he wore over the t-shirt, covered these orange strands and had numerous chest pockets to store extra kunai or shuriken. He had additional clothing, but that was for a different occasion. He looked at the shopping bags on the table, which he had bought with the assistance of a lavender-eyed beauty, after admiring himself in the mirror for a further minute. Naruto immediately went to the shower after organizing his shopping, putting his food in the cabinets, since he couldn't survive on toast and instant ramen, and putting his clothes and equipment in the wardrobe. The room was already smelling of a vigorous workout. Naruto cleaned his face, brushed his teeth, and washed his clothes after he appeared. Naruto then started adhering to routine, which was the most dull thing he had ever learned. Don't get me wrong, routine can be beneficial at times, but Naruto had done it so frequently in the gloomier future that it all became hazy after he had performed the first few course steps. Before he knew it, he had been fed and was lying in bed in his pajamas, the grayish cover of which was only a centimeter from his chin. Now, before giving in to the urge to sleep, Naruto would typically take stock of his day, which he would later describe in a single word: dreary. One word for today: success. In addition to taking Neji down a few pegs and establishing a basic relationship with Hinata and Shikamaru, who had arrived after the two had completed their shopping and invited Naruto to join them for tea tomorrow, which Naruto happily accepted. He also spent a brief day out with Hinata following their brief shopping frenzy. They had primarily strolled around, visiting all of the village's top locations, and had engaged in numerous conversations. Ultimately, he had accompanied her home to the Hyuga compound and had said goodbye without causing any redness on either cheek. The fact that he had kept one of his broken promises, taking Hinata to Kaiite, the place she had pleaded with him to visit on that fateful day, was what made him feel so good about himself that he could confront the challenges that lay ahead with an unimaginable level of certainty. Although he had promised to take her to the Kaiite restaurant and it wasn't the same Hinata, he thought it was close enough. After that, he was embraced by sleep. Naruto's eyes adjusted to the new darkness by blinking. There he stood, in a sewer. Turning around, Naruto's eyes recognized the location that had served as his mindscape and the location where he had suppressed his tears from the outside world. Despite its age, this location felt different. The water was freezing cold and the darkness was more intense. He was shocked to see how much he resembled himself when he looked down at himself. A man of 20, not a child of 12. He was wearing brown shinobi pants and a deep red, brown cotton shirt under his father's coat. It appeared that this red, brown, and white combination would stand out in both leaf and crowd settings. However, once the coat was removed, the remaining material was ideal for blending with stone faces or tree bark. His gaze shifted from his clothing to. His eyes narrowed as he peered at the Kyuubi's cage's bars, which appeared to contain nothing but darkness. But additional research showed that to be untrue. Was he standing right in front of the bars at the very edge of the cage? Naruto stepped back and blinked, staring at a smaller boy wearing an orange jumpsuit. Though obviously a distorted version, the young Naruto bore a striking resemblance to his former self. Even though the child's eyes were blue, they appeared lifeless and vacant. The child opened its mouth and whispered as the elder Naruto stared at his double. The child who suppresses their tears is a fool. The man who lies in his fears is a fool. Naruto decided he could not approach a picture of his younger self reciting eerie poetry, so he took a step back. Then, out of fear rather than safety, the man stopped. Tendons of red, bloody muscle protruded from the darkness behind the boy. The tendrils encircled the boy from head to toe as he let out a shrill cry before the man could speak or take any action. As blood trickled down the blond boy's jumpsuit, turning from bright orange to dark red, the man stood motionless at the wet spot. Once the legs and chest were fully covered, the tendrils plunged into the boy's skin and eye sockets, and the screaming became intolerable. However, the cries of agony were replaced by high-pitched laughter. The child Naruto looked up at the adult Naruto, who had fanged teeth and bloody sockets. The boy who held on to promises is dead. The man who depends on chances will be here soon. And it opened its mouth as it let out another shriek of laughter. Naruto eventually recovered his leg power as more blood-stained tentacles sprang from the enormous hole. The sound of dripping blood and splashing footfalls filled the 20-year-old's ears as he sped away from the Kyuubi's cage. Faces started to emerge from the shadows as he pounded through the sewer's pitch-black tunnels. The blank, accusing stares of the people he had sworn to protect, Iruka, with his open and bleeding scar, Shino, with his face white and his glasses crooked, Hinata, with blood dripping down her cheeks, and innumerable others, whom he had neglected to safeguard. While he was still running through the darkness, another face joined the crowd as the eyes of the fallen closed in on him. It was tiny at first, an indistinguishable dot in the pitch-black expanse in front of the escaping man. However, the memory of the tentacles, which were still pursuing him assiduously, became less important as Naruto drew nearer. The tiny, adolescent head that had been so far away was now directly in front of him. Naruto's blue eyes widened as he gazed down into black, beetle eyes that were obscured by the teenager's straw hat. The teen grinned at Naruto in the way a brother would, and the blonde recognized it at that precise moment. Raising his hand, he made a futile attempt to quickly drag the teenager away from danger. A whooshing sound came as his fingers were just a hair's breadth from the teenager's shoulder. The teen's shirt was on fire the next second, and the red flames were already reaching his toes and fingers. Watching in horror as the boy exploded into flames, Naruto pulled his hand away, the tips of his fingers scorched. The sound of the scream echoed painfully through Naruto's eardrums. Nevertheless, the teenager's grin remained firmly fixed on his melted face. Despite being broad and toothy, the smile was bare and blank. That is how a skull's smile is always. Broad but meaningless. It only disappears when the skull is crushed or buried far below the surface. When it fell to the sewer floor, however, along with the rest of the teen's bones, Naruto lost sight of it. As Naruto looked at the bones he was stunned, his heart pounding like a heavy metal drum. He heard a humph that he was all too familiar with, and his head shot up. Sasuke Uchiha's ruthless face, raven hair, and red eyes were behind the new pile of bones and in front of the blonde. Fury pulsing through his veins, Naruto instinctively reached for his coat's inner pocket, where he concealed the ninja tools. However, a loud cackle came from behind the man as his fingers slipped into the concealed coat pocket. He whirled, his fingers extracting nothing. His eyes were filled with confusion as he gazed at his empty hand. He looked at the source of the new sound, and both of his mysteries were resolved. Sakura stood a few feet away with a variety of shuriken and kunai. Her dress was dripping blood, and her face was displaying malice, but her pink hair remained the same. An emotion started to run through Naruto's body as he gazed at the girl, whose eyes were bursting with laughter as they saw the dead teen's bones. This emotion became stronger and more focused when rage joined it. This emotion was one of hatred. Anger at Sasuke appeared to be a tender embrace as pure, unbridled hatred descended upon Naruto's face. He charged at Sakura without a weapon, his hands reaching for her throat. Suddenly, Naruto experienced a pull that nearly knocked him off his feet. The blonde was shocked when he looked at his right forearm and discovered 5 bloody tentacles. Disguised by the blood dripping from Sakura's dress, they had snaked beneath the water and were now claiming their prize. Naruto felt another tug as 4 more coiled around his arm, as if something were attempting to tear his left arm from its socket. His eyes discovered the source, and they were not pleased. This time, from behind the duck butt, Sasuke, more tentacles had slithered out of the shadows. But there was no blood dripping from these tentacles. Rather, they roared with a reddish, dark flame that Naruto was all too familiar with. Naruto started to struggle against the tentacles' iron grip, with an equal number of them now on either side. The blonde man let out a cry of agony as both sets of tentacles tugged at him with the force of a herd of horses. Once more, they pulled, maintaining the motion. Naruto was the unwilling rope in a tug of war between fire and blood that had started. The blonde persisted in struggling until his arm was torn off by a hard jerk from the right. As blood spurted from the socket of Naruto's right arm, his screams appeared to reverberate throughout the sewer. It was not the end of the bloody tentacles. The 9 bloody things, on the other hand, started to approach his head. This change of target appeared to be noticed by the left, which had nearly severed the man's left arm. The burning tentacles joined the bloody 9 in their new hunt, leaving the arm that was dangling by a thin strip of flesh. A tentacle encircled Naruto's mouth, muffled his screams. Then the left and right tentacles started pulling and tugging. Naruto was in excruciating pain. His face started to rip apart, his forehead splitting in 2 and his brain being crushed. After a final pull, his head was no. Naruto leapt to his feet, his swiftness dislodging his cover. He was drenched in SMG grade perspiration, and his whole body was either trembling like a leaf or covered in cold sweat. In a state of mindless concern, the blonde proceeded to see if his head was still intact. He started to feel his face with both hands, rubbing his forehead and tapping his chin. Naruto finally put his head back on his pillow after a minute of frantic panic. In order to see the view of Konoha beyond the window pane, he cocked his head to the left. Although it only showed a few buildings, the academy, and a small portion of the Hokage faces, Naruto found comfort in the knowledge that his village was quiet and safe. He noticed the dim image of his reflection. The image of a child's face, as his vision grew blurry and glassy as sleep encircled him once more. He bolted upright and sat up, remembering every detail of his nightmare. Rejecting the embrace of sleep, he turned to face his dim reflection. In those brief moments, his breathing had increased by an octave, but Naruto saw that his eyes were sea blue with no hint of red. Moreover, Naruto noticed a certain dullness in his iris, in contrast to a child's baby blue eyes. Although it wasn't a bad effect, it gave the impression that his eyes were older than his face. He pondered whether anyone else had observed this aspect of his eyes. Although it might result in uncomfortable and unwanted questions, he wasn't concerned that they would assume he was from the future because who could figure that out without a big bottle of sake? Naruto swung his legs out of bed and turned his head away from any thoughts of sleep, looking around the room. He sat on his bed's edge now and looked at the alarm on his bedside table. It said 20 minutes after 5, 40 minutes earlier than normal. He had woken up. He got up at 6 because it took him 30 minutes to eat, wash, and put on his clothes. He would then arrive at his regular training ground at 7 o'clock after doing a few laps around Konoha, a habit that the spandex duo had instilled in him. After that, he would spend roughly 2 hours practicing his taijutsu or ninjutsu. That's what he had been doing until 4 days ago. Naruto now sat down at Kaide with Hinata Hyuga, the raven-haired beauty, rather than going directly to training and foregoing the eating portion of his half-hour. Naruto and Hinata had decided to train in the mornings on the recommendation of Rai, an ex-shinobi who was the chef and owner of Kaide. At first, Hinata had been concerned about rising early because she thought Naruto might not enjoy having to get up so early. However, she forgot her reservations after the blonde reassured her that he was already training early. However, Hinata's concern for Naruto's feelings was admirable. The fact that Hinata nearly passed out when Naruto asked her the same question was the bigger issue. In spite of this, they decided to get together for breakfast at Kaide at 7 o'clock. Rai gave them a nutritious meal as well as a small training discount. Following roughly 15 minutes of rice and tea, the training partners headed to Naruto's training area. Since both children were still bashful around one another, they had traveled to the training ground in an awkward silence the first time. They both succeeded in overcoming their blushes during greetings and farewells at the conclusion of their first training session. Naruto was instructing Hinata in the tree climbing exercise as the two ninja had started their combined training with chakra control. It turned out that Hinata was aware of the tree exercise. Her father had explained it to her and made her complete it without even explaining the fundamentals of how to do it. Without even providing an example, her father had done this with numerous other forms and techniques, requiring her to perform them to his standards. Naruto had never heard of Hinata's future self-training with her father, so this was new to him. It not only irritated the blonde that her father had been such a fool, but it also clarified for him why Hinata was constantly disparaging her own abilities. Hinata flourished after a brief motivational speech about how her father had been a baka and that she shouldn't be deterred by his foolishness. She was able to complete the water walking and tree climbing exercises without even getting wet. Naruto reasoned that his motivational speech might have been delivered in the original timeline, most likely by her sensei Kurenai, and that it was because of him that it had such a dramatic impact now. After chakra control, they turned their attention to taijutsu. Despite her newly discovered self-confidence, Naruto chose to begin slowly with Hinata. To battle Hinata, he called forth a lone shadow clone, instructing it to remain motionless so the Hyuga could hone her soft fist. However, the clone was instructed to doge, defend, and then attack while stationary. Before long, Hinata was up against roughly 5 clones, all of whom were attempting to strike the girl with the lavender eyes. At this point, Naruto entered the fray and engaged his own group of copies in combat. Even though something painful happened, everything went smoothly. At 7:30 a.m., 4 days ago, Naruto aimed at his target while flying through the air with an arm raised and covered in black sleeves. The blonde's failed blow was caught by the target, which ducked and threw him over its shoulder. The blonde puffed into a cloud of smoke and slammed into the ground. The real Naruto, the target, immediately straightened his legs, spun around, elbow up, and made contact with the jaw of another clone. 2 additional clones disappeared as he continued to spin and delivered a spinning roundhouse kick in the same fluid motion. Naruto turned to his right and delivered a left uppercut to eliminate the final clone as his kicking leg returned to the ground, forming a karate horse stance. Breathing heavily and grinning widely, Naruto lowered his fist. After eliminating his final foe, the shinobi in the black jacket turned to his left to observe his crush smashing her own copies of himself. In order to practice water walking, they had relocated from the main clearing to the forest river. Each shinobi had a separate fighting area. The blonde had the north, while the girl with the raven hair had the south. She was hitting left and right with her blazing Byakugan, preventing the clones from thinking. The final 2 were on their way to join the 3 that had already fallen. One of the clones made a desperate attempt to attack Hinata from behind, while the other tried to divert the Hyuga's attention from the front. She made the decision to target both the attack and the decoy. She stepped forward, pretending she had not noticed the clone behind her, her honed eyes fixed on the phony clone. The clone behind her jumped through the air, his right leg ready for a dropkick, falling for her bluff. With a swift turn, Hinata aimed a jab at the clone's outstretched leg. Hinata's aim had been slightly off, though, for some reason. She had accidentally struck the tenketsu point, chakra point, in the clone's pride rather than the muscle of her upper leg. Now, depending on how the clone was killed, Naruto also felt a slight jolt of pain because of the shadow clone jutsu's memory sharing feature. Naruto could ignore them in combat. He might get a nasty twinge, though, if he was motionless, like observing a girl train. The blonde knelt down, clutching his privates and screaming in agony as soon as the clone Hinata had struck in the bottom scroll, vanished. With her 360-degree vision, Hinata had witnessed the original's collapse. She gasped in horror and rushed to the blonde's side, leaving the final clone to reflect the anguish of its original. "Naruto," she exclaimed, watching the blonde writhe with worried eyes. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" He genuinely added, "All right. No, I feel like my member is bleeding. My shadow clones can pass on memories back to me, including pain. I can usually ignore it when I'm fighting." With a wince as he attempted to sit upright in order to face Hinata. "Ow. I'm fine, Hinata. Chan." He looked down at his legs and said, "But if I'm standing around, I get a full blast. And that was the first time I received a gentle fist to my nuts. I hope you weren't aiming down there." A faint twinge of guilt appeared on Hinata's face as she shook her head. She had a sudden thought that wasn't good for their friendship. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. I didn't mean to hit you there. I was aiming at the tenketsu point in your clone's leg. I didn't, did I?" Naruto understood what she was saying, and he laughed quietly. The blonde attempted to stand, but his legs were still reacting to the pain, nearly toppling him. No, they're fine, Hinata. Chan. I only get the memory, not the physical damage. Hinata got him up and held him there until he was able to control his lower limbs again. As Naruto tested his movement by tapping his feet on the ground, the tension remained high, so the blonde attempted to defuse the situation. Well, at least I've got forewarning of what'll happen if I make you mad. Numerous factors, such as Naruto's support, her training success, or the fact that it was simply too hot, could have contributed to what transpired next. Hinata made the decision to try something out of sheer force. If it wasn't for her seductive purr or the way she batted her eyelashes, Naruto was tomato red and thought he might pass out right then. Oh, I don't think I'll ever get mad at you, Naruto-kun. You two seem to be having fun. Hinata and Naruto whirled around, which further embarrassed him by sending the blonde to the ground. Rai was wearing a chief's apron and was standing between two trees. His wide smile highlighted his scars. With the exception of his dark skin and clean shave, Rai appeared to be as tall as Asuma now that they could see him without being behind a counter. His jet black hair, about as tall as cut grass, was also visible to them. Rai had been able to walk across the open space between the trees and the river as Naruto jumped back up on his feet. After he had recovered, Naruto said, "Rai, what are you doing here?" Rai gave a little laugh when the young ninjas blushed and said, "I wanted to see how you two lovebirds were getting on." He paused as a memory appeared to flash through his mind, causing a faint smile. Ha, ha. I'm starting to see why Ibiki teased me and, he said. He stopped reminiscing and started talking in a booming voice. Anyway, like I said, I wanted to see how you'd train. I'm impressed you started with chakra control. Very good, and I must say that using shadow clones for dummies is a good idea. I was worried that you would overuse the technique, but it looks like you've got an amazing supply of chakra. Not bad for a kid your age. Rai either ignored or failed to notice Naruto's mildly irritated glare as he went on talking. Hinata laughed apprehensively, but her cheeks did not flush. Now that you've finished taijutsu, in a rather abrupt way. The chief then produced 2 blank pieces of paper, which Naruto recognized as, I think it's time for ninjutsu. Now this is quite advanced, but I think I might be able to help you with elemental jutsu. I brought. Hinata had been staring at the paper in confusion, but now she was looking excited as she said, chakra paper, sheets of chakra-infused paper that react when chakra is channeled through it. Naruto feigned excitement, but on the inside, he was terrified. Since only those who had trained continuously could attain even a double element, he did not want to disclose that he had 3 affinities. 2 of his own and 1 of the fox. He could pretend it was a unique, innate talent, but that would only make him more suspicious, and he didn't need that. Although he saw that the blonde did so with a hint of bitterness in his eyes, Rai gave Hinata her chakra paper and did the same with Naruto. The chef gave a forceful shake of his head. It was the same crazy feeling that made him think the word older each time he looked the blonde in the eyes. His ears picked up on the sound of dripping, diverting his attention from this. The thin piece of paper was soaked wet from Hinata's chakra course, which caused it to wilt. Ah, Rai cried excitedly. You have the same element as me, water. This is good, I can teach you the basics myself. Also, because it's usual that girls have better chakra control than boys, I could teach you the basics of being a medic. You could have a multi-role. An attacker and defender with water jutsus, a tracker with Ukeke Genkai and a healer with your medi skills. Hinata's eyes seemed to sparkle with excitement at the thought of how helpful she could be with either skill. Rai didn't have the courage to tell her that learning these skills would be difficult after seeing this. However, Rai surmised that she was already aware of the challenges ahead and was prepared to meet them head on thanks to Naruto's support and guidance. Rai was going to be pleasantly surprised. Speaking of the blonde, Rai looked around and noticed 3 things. He watched as Naruto's chakra paper broke in 2, turned grimy and gritted, and then caught fire. As Rai gazed at the charred remnants of the chakra paper, there was a brief pause. Hinata, who was not entirely aware of the significance of this incident, simply glanced from Rai's astonished expression to Naruto's shocked expression, which oddly enough appeared somewhat forced. So, said Naruto, his tone bewildered and inquisitive. Naruto made the mental decision to avoid playing dumb with affinities because it would conflict with his faking the idiot defense. Does this mean I have multiple affinities, or something? Like what Iruka talked about during his lectures? Rai said slowly, yes, Naruto. With his brow furrowed in focus, the chef bit his lip and said, to be precise, you have affinities with wind, earth, and fire. This is surprising. Very few ninjas have 3 affinities. and they had to train continuously to even get the potential of having a third. Naruto grinned sheepishly and chuckled a little. If that's true, then I must be a rare exception. I mean, I have dabbled with elemental manipulation. But I never thought I'd have that many affinities. Both Rai and Hinata gazed at the blonde inquisitively until they remembered the previous day's words. As a dark cloud appeared to pass over the blonde's head, Hinata stumbled. Wait, by dabbled? Do you mean the stuff that your father left for you? It appears that talking about his father is frowned upon around Naruto. Rai and Hinata have since realized this. Rai finally brought them all back to life after what felt like an eternity. So, Naruto, can you show me your results by dabbling with elemental manipulation? The training session then resumed its pace. To a certain degree, Naruto had demonstrated his dabbling with elemental jutsu to Rai and Hinata. In case Naruto had different affinities, he showed them the rudimentary attempts at genin water and lighting exercises, which he knew because his father had listed all element exercises. Additionally, he took this action to avoid raising suspicions. There would be awkward questions if he claimed to have only trained with the elements he was affiliated with after claiming to have only recently learned of this fact. He was forced to use all of his training when it came to wind manipulation because Iruka had seen his first attempt the night he went back in time. As Naruto cut 2 stones in each of his palms, Hinata was astounded by his skill. When Rai disclosed that it was a Junin-level exercise, she was even more impressed. The former shinobi was equally astounded, but he had a gut feeling that a self-taught boy couldn't have learned to acquire such power on his own. Rai remained silent and had brushed the impulse away from his instincts after the blonde demonstrated a Chunin earth exercise and a Genin fire exercise, in which the blonde burned his mouth. Rai had to admit that the next half hour was productive, even though it practically passed by. The majority of that time was spent overseeing Hinata, showing her a simple water manipulation exercise and providing her with a realistic assessment of how long it should take her to become proficient. Roughly a year. She had accepted it well and squatted by the river for 30 minutes, attempting to get water to float up and around her hand. To keep Naruto busy, the chef chose to demonstrate a challenging earth jutsu to the blonde, which he had learned from a former comrade. The staircase was known as Golem's Staircase. The hand signals were simple to execute, but this jutsu called for a combination of balance and chakra control. The ground will rise to the bottom of a person's heel when they raise their foot after landing on the final sign, the serpent. Rai found that the jutsu could be used to create deadly kicks, even though it was intended to be a non-lethal method of mobility. The ground will rise to your feet as usual while initially making contact with a man's chin if, after activating the jutsu, you swing your legs skywards, as if you're trying to kick someone in the chin but miss by a narrow margin. A pillar of dirt soon struck Naruto's eagerly glowing eyes as he embraced the challenge. 30 minutes later, with Rai in high spirits, Hinata feeling accomplished, and Naruto suffering from a black eye, they all decided to call it a day. Rai served the 2 ninjas a potent cup of herbal tea as the 3 marched back to Kai-Eat. Naruto.kun, would you like some ointment for your eye? Hinata asked slowly as Naruto finished his 3rd cup, her hands trembling a little, but her face was confident and free of embarrassing hues. Squinting through his swollen eye, the blonde recognized it and smiled slightly. Thank you, Sunshine. Chan. Naruto didn't realize what he had said until he had removed the ointment and started to pry off the lid. While cleaning his side of the counter, Rai struggled to determine which ninja's face was redder. The chef started to wonder if he should introduce himself to the young couple as the silence dragged on. However, the Raven girl managed to ask, "Had did you call me, Naruto? Kun?" just before he could put his thoughts into words. This was the first time in a long time that her voice had revealed a stutter, which is quite an accomplishment in my opinion. Sunshine. Chan. The boy said, his voice equally tremulous. His blue eyes were now fixed on the ground as he trailed off. You know, your name means, towards a sunny place. I'll understand if you don't want me to call you that. However, Hinata shook her head, a faint smile appearing on her face. No, she said in a stuttering, low whisper. With a sheepish grin now hanging on his mug, Naruto raised his head and said, I like it. I like it a lot. Their eyes were fixed on one another while their heartbeats pounded at the same rapid pace. The blonde's mouth parted, and young love. While Rai was perspiring and death glowed in their irises, Naruto and Hinata kept staring. Today. Naruto laughed when he recalled that final piece of information. Despite his reputation as a rotten teaser, Rai was an excellent teacher and chef. He had already won the blonde over even though they had just recently met. It was incredible to consider that, even before joining Team 7, this man had been there, preparing rice and serving tea while attempting to fulfill his dream of his parents accepting him as a talented chef at the Kai-Eat restaurant. The ostensibly fortunate number had reminded me of the current day. On that day, he was paired with Sakura and Sasuke, Konoha's future traitors and destroyers. No, Naruto thought. I won't allow that to occur. Hopefully, I can save both of them in the village. However, a voice asked him, but do you want to save them? From a dark corner of his soul that had nothing to do with the Kyuubi. Do they truly deserve your kindness after everything they did to you in this village? Just as they killed your friends, your teachers, your lover, etc., you could kill them now. In an attempt to shake off his gloomy thoughts, Naruto shook his head. His dark, vindictive desire vanished for the moment as he hurriedly mumbled, "No, they haven't done anything yet, they're not like their future selves and they're never going to be," in an attempt to drown out his inner evil. Naruto's senses were abruptly brought back to reality by a loud ringing. After Jiraiya was caught peeping, his alarm clock, which now read 6, was blazing like a horde of women pursuing him. Naruto leapt to his feet after slamming his fist into the red ringer. His body quickly settled into the dull morning routine. Like a robot, Naruto took a shower, washed his pajamas, and chose his clothes, the same ones he had purchased and worn on his first shopping trip with Hinata. The blonde was taken out of his routine as he asked himself, Chinese breakfast or Western fry-up? Because he and Hinata had decided not to train today. Before long, the apartment was filled with the sounds of sizzling bacon, eggs, and sausages. The blonde grabbed a knife and fork and started eating his breakfast, relishing the luscious flavor of one of his pork sausages. In the future, Western food had swept the village. Revived drinks like milkshakes and coffee that had been dormant in food markets for years. Naruto had taken a strong liking to the new cutlery dining fad, even though it had been in the final days before the ominous cloud of Sasuke's invasion rose above Konoha. His thoughts shifted to a crucial issue as he cut into the yolk of his fried egg. How would he behave toward his future teammates? Naruto had already made up his mind not to follow the path of foolishness, but he had completely avoided discussing how he would work with the duck, butt and banshee. The whole "Sasuke is like a brother to me" sentiment had been shattered long ago, or later, by the horrors he had perpetrated, so he couldn't pretend to have it back. And he would definitely stop swooning over Sakura once Jiraiya stopped being a pervert. He felt the urge to murder someone just thinking about that treacherous, two-faced whore. He lowered his now bent fork onto his empty plate with a clatter after closing his eyes and counting to 10. It was clear that Sakura would incite more hatred than Sasuke, even after everything he had done to the defenseless citizens of the elemental nations. When the ninja cities started to collapse, she was among the last people he could rely on, and it turned out that she was the reason the entire village was destroyed. With his hands now occupied with clearing away his breakfast, Naruto thought, "It looks like my main challenge in this mission. If I want to save Sasuke from himself, I will try my hardest to ignore my hatred of Sakura. There's no need to make her redemption easy." His future appeared a bit more promising, and he smiled slightly. Naruto started to open the drawer of his bedside table as the alarm clock hand approached 6:30. The metal plate of Iruka's headband reflected the joy and purpose that seemed to shine in his blue eyes. With grim determination, the blonde picked up his headband with care, as if he were handling a newborn. He felt as though this moment, this reenactment of his past, was the beginning of his struggle when he finally tied the knot tight around his head. His fight against the future that two people's actions had carved out for the village, his friends, and the country. He must save two selfish and hollow individuals from their worst enemy, their own selves. He strode straight to the door of his apartment. After taking one final glance at his neat, if a bit too neat, room, he swung the door open and strode out, ready to take on the day's challenges. He didn't realize the academy wouldn't be open for another 2.5 hours until he had jumped onto the next rooftop, with a sense of purpose radiating from him.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.